Got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit, and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at ThomHartmann.com. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Black Panthers, Portraits from an Unfinished Revolution, edited by Briasha and Yohuro Williams. This is from Chapter 1, In Defense of Self-Defense, Pathways to the Black Panther Party. People joined the Black Panther Party for many different reasons. The moment of politicization was different for everyone, but a few were commonly shared, including the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, and the 1965 Watts Urban Rebellion. A more general sense of frustration and alienation compelled others to join the Panthers' ranks. The party exerted enormous pull on the imagination of the members, especially those who had experienced police brutality. In the rebellious spirit of the times, the party's bold stance on self-defense resonated with those seeking fresh alternatives for achieving social justice and black liberation. Party members expressed a deep appreciation for other aspects of the Panthers program, including its community service programs, which grew out of a genuine love for the people. My neighborhood friend, a sister that I've known since I was about 11 years old, said, Claudia, I want you to go with me. We're going to go and hear these Panthers speak at PS 92, which was an elementary school in our community. I said, okay, I'll go, I'm down. I listened to these brothers speak, and I heard the pitch. I saw the determination, and I saw the compassion. I thought, wow, this is the feeling that I used to get when I went into clubs and popped my fingers and got on the dance floor. It was the same feeling, except it was bigger for me now. It was bigger than me. It was full of love of the people. No longer did we have to argue and fight about, what are you looking at me like that for? Or don't step on my sneaker, or this is my block. Now we really had something to fight for. We had a people to fight for. This is bigger than any gang or club. We had a goal. We had something to look forward to, which was the betterment of black people. It was most definitely something that I was searching for, but I didn't yet know what that I was searching. I didn't find it. It fell on me. That was the first meeting. That's what actually started the wheels in my mind for me to become political. I was rank and file. I did a lot of things. The easiest way to say it is just to imagine worker bees. You got one queen, everyone else works. Rank and file. Those were the worker bees. We did it all. The one thing I enjoyed the most was teaching the political education classes on 7th Avenue in front of the Harlem office. That was the most fruitful. But anything I did, it was for the love of the people. Wherever I was sent, or whatever I had to do, it didn't matter anymore because it was for the love of the people. We were trying to get the word out. If I had to sell 125 papers in a day and I got close to that goal, then I did a good job. I was originally from Queens and came out of the Corona branch of the Black Panther Party. When the Panther 21 were arrested and went to jail, in order to keep those offices open and functioning, Panthers were sent all over the city to Harlem. I was one of the Panthers that ended up in the Harlem branch. That's how I got to be there on Wednesday nights to give the PE classes, the political education classes. I was extremely nervous the first time, but once I found my voice, then it went like clockwork. A lot of the people in the community who were just walking by were like, well, let me stop and see what this little girl is talking about, because I was indeed a little girl at that time. We started off every PE class with a 10-point program, and we ended every PE class with, okay, let me hear from you guys. What do you want to see different in your community, and how are you living? Then we would get the feedback, and then we would know how to concentrate our efforts. Rent strikes were crazy, because if you had to live like that, why should you pay rent? We did clothing drives. We did food drives. We did, of course, the breakfast program. There were a lot of other things that happened, and they might have been more meaningful, but those PE classes stayed with me. We were outside on the street in front of the office. When you were giving a class or you were having a talk inside the office and there were only Panthers around you, the feeling was just different than outside on the street. The Panthers knew what you were doing because they were Panthers and they were doing the same thing. Outside, there were constant questions and answers with the people. You had to give yourself up when you were outside in that crowd. You never knew who was going to say, we don't care about that, we don't care about you, you need to go away. There were a lot of people that just did not know where we were coming from and were afraid that if they were seen in the office or if they were seen asking questions, that they'd get reprisals, that they'd end up getting hurt. They were afraid. Things went so fast. Time seems to accelerate when you're always looking over your shoulder. At this time, it was all-out war against the Panthers, and brothers are being shot down in the street or set up or going to jail for years. We have brothers in jail since that time, 40, 41 years. We've had brothers that we've lost on the inside that we can't let the world forget. The government said, okay, we're going to lock them up and throw away the key and no one will ever care. But it's not true. We want them out. We want freedom for all political prisoners. We don't want any more of them to die on the inside. That's the biggest injustice. There were times when our cadre consisted of almost nothing but women, and that was when the brothers were locked up or had to go underground. I remember being on a front line against a policeman on horseback and being 6 months pregnant. What we wanted was a simple street light, and we got the community out there and we blocked traffic. I didn't know whether I was going to be trampled, my baby killed, but I knew I had to be there. I was an active member of the party from 1968 to 1971, and in those few years, I aged 10, 15 years. We didn't have much time to be little girls. We went straight to womanhood. Talking about these things is bringing up all of these feelings, though I hadn't thought about or touched on them for a long time. It seems that as you get older and you look back on the things that you've done in your life, you say, oh my God, I could have gotten killed then. When you're young, fear is not really in your vocabulary, and once you look back, you wonder, why wasn't I afraid? We didn't have much time to be afraid. It was all about survival.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Happy Wednesday. Wow, the country is starting to melt down, but my cat is really happy. We have actually 3 cats. The youngest his name is Keddy, and we discovered, I was poking around YouTube, and there's all these videos for cats. I mean, if you go to YouTube and just type in videos for cats, there's one that's like 8 hours long, and it's some guy in the UK who has taken the top of a table that is next to a little hillside with grass and stuff, and he puts food on there. And the birds come and eat it, and the squirrels come and steal it, and the mice come and snatch what they can. And my cat has been watching this since 7 o'clock this morning. He's just sitting there, and he's still there right now, 2 hours later. So, cat porn on YouTube. Am I damaging my cat, do you think? I don't know. I mean, should I limit his screen time? These are extraordinary times, so I'm inclined to let him watch all the cat porn he wants. But anyhow, meanwhile, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick of Texas, I mentioned this yesterday, said essentially that old people should be willing and enthusiastic to patriotically die so that Trump can put our economy back into gear. Right. Apparently he didn't get the memo that most of them will die in a hospital, clogging up our healthcare system and infecting our healthcare workers. I mean, the bizarre part about this is Trump, day before yesterday, when he was when he was doing his little town hall with Fox News, he said, 35,000 Americans die every year from the flu. Has nobody told him that COVID-19 has a mortality rate, that is dead people, between 1% and 3%? There's 330 people in million people in America. If 1/3 of Americans get sick with this virus, that's 110 million people. A death rate of 1% means 1.1 million people dead in the United States. Now, a death rate of 2%, and that's with only 1/3 of us getting infected, a death rate of 2% is 2.2 million people dead in the United States. And this disease also has a 20% rate of hospitalization. So if you get 100 million people who are sick with this, and that's really just 1/3 of America, that's the most conservative, happy face estimates out there. 1/3 of Americans. That's 110 million Americans. You're going to need 21 million hospital beds. We have nationwide 1 million hospital beds. We had 1.5 million when Reagan came into office. He stopped enforcing the Sherman Act. As a result, all these hospitals started moving for profit and consolidating and buying up their weaker competitors and putting them out of business. And as a result of this, we now have only 1 million hospital beds. We used to have 1.5 million in 1980. We're at 1 million right now. And apparently nobody told Dan Patrick this. Apparently nobody told Donald Trump. Glenn Beck says, I'm willing to die patriotically for the economy. Really? It's not, first of all, your dying patriotically is not going to help the economy. In fact, it's going to clog it up. You'll just be another person in a hospital for a week and a half on a ventilator before you croak, Glenn. And secondly, you're going to be infecting the people around you. You're going to be infecting friends and coworkers. You're going to be infecting the hospital workers. This is the big crisis they're having in Spain right now. 12% of all the people who are sick in Spain are hospital workers. They're losing their doctors and nurses because they weren't prepared for this. They didn't have the equipment. Just like we weren't prepared for this, and we don't have the equipment. But that's what's happening in Spain. It's already happened in Italy. It happened in China. The guy who discovered the coronavirus, the physician, died of it in his 30s. I mean, this latest story about how transmissible this is, now dangerous it is. Florida's Department of Health, this is from The Hill, Florida's Department of Health announced yesterday afternoon, that a baby boy and a 2-year-old girl have tested positive with the coronavirus. The baby boy is less than a year old. And, they're trying to figure out how these kids got it. Broward County has reported 312 cases as of this morning, compared with Miami-Dade's 367. I don't know if you caught the segment on Rachel Maddow's show last night where she had on the guy who is the owner of a company that sells smart thermometers. And when you use the smart thermometer, all the data, it's apparently anonymous, but it's got location data tied to it. And so it goes back to the company. And the company can see nationwide where there are fever outbreaks. And when you look at this, you see, New York City is glowing, nice and bright red. A lot of fevers in New York City. Washington State is glowing bright red. You got a couple of little spots around San Francisco. But the entire state of Florida looks like it's got the pox. I mean, it's just exploded across Florida, which means if people are starting to get the fevers right now, in a week, they're going to start showing up in the ER. And Ron DeSantis in Florida is like, I don't, nothing, no problem. Let the old people die, right? Just weed them out. And who cares about our hospital workers? We don't need no stinking hospitals or doctors or nurses. Let them all die. And then Brit Hume on Fox News says, that's an entirely reasonable position. That was his phrase, entirely reasonable. Yes, entirely reasonable. It's not only stupid and illogical, but it's also a sign of sociopathy, an absolute inability to empathetically connect with other people. I mean, what's next? Turn old people into Soylent Green? Just boil it well first? I mean, that's the direction it seems that we're going. So anyhow, we are talking about how we get through a national crisis. I want to get into the Senate bill, which has not yet passed the House. Passing the Senate is a big deal because the Republicans there are, and update you on what's going on with regard to the Trump administration and all this. And of course, we'll pick up your phone calls on these and any other issues you want. The one thing I am asking people to do is, we've had a couple of people come on the air in the last 24, 48 hours and say, oh, I found a great website, or here's you need to email me at this address, or you need to check this out. And, a couple of them have been really good suggestions, and a couple of them have been obviously the equivalent of spam. So I'm asking people, unless you're a regular caller to the program and Joyce recognizes you, do not call in with, hey, let's all take echinacea, or let's all take, massive amounts of vitamin C or whatever. I mean, there's nothing wrong with staying healthy. Do everything you can, but let's just be sensible about this. So this $2 trillion coronavirus bill that Trump's tweeting he's in favor of. It specifically bans the Trump family, well, actually anybody who works in the White House or Congress, from receiving any of the benefits. I don't know if they exempted the Supreme Court as well or not. But taxpayer-backed loans cannot go to companies owned by Donald Trump. So what's he going to do? He's going to give them all to his son, right? This is going to be the thing that's going to cause him to divest himself. If, or he'll figure out some scam way around it. He'll have his son create a new company and say, well, this company should do it. But anyhow, provides $150 billion for state and local stimulus funds, $130 billion for hospitals, extends unemployment insurance benefits. You get an additional $600 a week from the feds if you're on state unemployment. Republicans agreed to allow an oversight board and create a Treasury Department Special Inspector General for pandemic recovery. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is the 5 members of the board are appointed by the president, and their oversight is provided by the Senate. You got a Republican president, a Republican Senate. I'm not real, optimistic about how that's going to play out, but, hey, these are tough times. Now, the House is out of session right now. We'll be talking to Congressman Mark Pocan tomorrow, by the way. But Mnuchin says Trump is going to sign the bill. That's the good news. The bad news after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Stick around. The administration is still moving forward with their cuts to Social Security, food stamps, SNAP, and other benefit programs. We'll have that in a moment. And welcome back. Let's see here. Aaron in Seattle. Hey, Aaron, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I was calling because I've been hearing that as part of the deal and everything, the government is now going to be purchasing ETFs and corporate-backed securities.
Yeah, the Fed.
You know what's going on with that?
The Fed started that yesterday, and they have an unlimited amount of money that they can use to buy them. And that, in my opinion, that's the main reason that the market went up. They have said that they are dedicating up to $4 trillion to basically buy stocks, ETFs, and bonds, bad loans from big corporations. And so by the Fed doing this, and of course, if a bond looked like it's going bad, or the bondholder, or the bond issuer, the company is not making their payments on their bonds or something like that, the Fed, has the ability to simply ignore that. Whereas if those bonds are being held by an investor, or particularly an active investor, a hedge fund, an insurance company, something like that, pension fund, if the bondholders start to default, they would be, screaming bloody murder. The Fed won't. The Fed will. So this is a variation on the TARP program, where the Fed bought several $1 trillion worth of home mortgage-backed securities and basically just sat on them until they expired, and eventually sold them back into the marketplace at an enormous discount. That's how they got through 2008, 2009. It looks like they're planning to get through the great stock market crash and corporate debt crisis this way. And, I have mixed feelings about it, Aaron. On the one hand, It is the Fed supporting a bunch of corporations that have made really stupid decisions. Apple is sitting on $236 billion in cash. Apple will not be looking for a bailout. The airlines spent $46 billion over the last 10 years using their surplus cash to buy back their own stock, to raise stock prices, to goose the benefits to their senior executives, their CEOs, and their stockholders. I don't think they should be bailed out, frankly. I think their employees should be, but I don't think the airlines should be. So, but that's the story I've got, Aaron. It's the Fed, and that's how they're going to do it.
Okay. I was just looking for more thoughts on it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Those are my thoughts on it. Tammy in Spirit Lake, Iowa. Hey, Tammy, we got a minute till the break. What's up?
Hey, Tom. I was just going to report to you that last night I participated in a tele-town hall with Steve King, and he asked 3 questions, survey questions. One was, did we think Governor Reynolds was doing a good job? Number 2, do we think testing would make a difference? But the third one was, do we think people's names should be made public should they test positive, which I found kind of odd, and he didn't release the answers to that one.
Wow. So did anybody, I'm assuming then you didn't have the ability to confront him on air. I mean, Steve King of Iowa is a pretty toxic guy.
Hit *3 and ask him a question, but, I rarely get picked because I did confront him one time. I'm surprised they still call my phone number, but it was, and also at the same time, I had people calling me from the Council Bluffs area who showed all the symptoms of the coronavirus and were not able to get tested. I mean, because I work in a job that interviews people. So it's just also scary.
Yeah, it is, and, be very, very careful. I mean, we have a lot of knowledge about this. We can protect ourselves. Tammy, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. We have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and the essence of it is, I use a couple of examples. There's hundreds of them out there. In one case, Alabama is preparing to execute a man who was not guilty of the crime that he committed with a relatively high level of certainty, but still they're gonna kill this guy, an African American. And the other story out of New York State where the police officers hogtied this guy, elbows behind him, tied his legs together, and then threw him down a flight of stairs, mangled his face. He looked he was totally beaten. 12 hours later, he commits suicide in his cell. How is it possible that our prisons do this kind of stuff? Because the 13th Amendment says that slavery is still legal in the United States. You have no rights if you've been convicted of a crime. We need to amend the Constitution. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. So to get back to this, just bringing you up to date on the news of the last 24 hours that has to do with this, and as I said, we can discuss things beyond coronavirus too if you want, but that is the biggest story in America right now. The editorial board of the New York Times last night is calling for all Americans to shelter in place. This should be an order from the federal government, from the president. It won't be because he's an incompetent ass, but it should be. The editorial board of the New York Times says the United States is past the point where aggressive targeted efforts at tracking and containment have a realistic chance of success. Yeah, we're past that point because Trump fiddled while America burned. We'll get back to that in just a moment. The New York Times editorial board says we are urging Trump to use the bully pulpit to put pressure on and provide political cover for governors, because these are hard steps, right? And a lot of these governors, Idaho, for example, the governor of Idaho hasn't basically done nothing, right? And, Boise has not yet started popping, but it will soon. I'm just telling you, everybody coming back from spring break is bringing this all over the country. It's, Florida is we're going to discover that Florida is the well from which the rest of the nation is being poisoned. And it'll have to do with spring break and young people. Mark my words, 2 weeks from today, you'll see what I'm talking about. Modeling by researchers at the Imperial College London indicates that upward of 2 million lives could be lost to the pandemic unless we somehow manage to flatten the curve. 2 million, you remember my speaking before, 2 million people. That's assuming a 2% death rate and only 100 million people getting infected. Those are both optimistic. The editorial board is reluctant to grant any White House more executive power, they write, much less this one, given its track record. But there is no one else to coordinate at the national level. It's time to put an end to the free-form daily task force briefings featuring the president, and they say it's a poor use of time, and just appoint an expert, somebody who knows what they're doing, and have that person go on. Meanwhile, we discovered that yesterday Donald Trump desperately called the president of South Korea. Now, the published readout of this call from the White House includes absolutely no mention of coronavirus, but the South Korean government, it's called Blue House, they published a readout in which Trump says, you guys are doing great work in your early testing, and by the way, can you please sell us some ventilators? This is after Trump said we should never be relying on a foreign country. The official account, Moon said that South Korea would be willing to export critical supplies, quote, if there is a domestic surplus. Right. We'll see. We'll see. Meantime, the Social Security Administration is going, quote, full steam ahead. This is from a quote from somebody in the Social Security Administration, end quote, on new rules limiting disability benefits, which could affect hundreds of thousands of people. That's for Social Security disability income, SSDI. They're going full speed ahead to make it harder and harder and harder to get these disability benefits out of Social Security. Meanwhile, HHS, Department of Health and Human Services, and HUD, Housing and Urban Development, are both going to continue their regular rulemaking process to, quote, this is from an article by over on Huffington Post. I don't have the author's name. To reduce automatic re-enrollment in health coverage, and to make it harder for renters to sue landlords for racial discrimination. The U.S. Department of Agriculture said it'll comply with a recently passed law suspending limits on the SNAP program for the duration, which I suppose is good news, suspending limits, but the law effectively, the law effectively halted a regulation that would have taken effect next month, cutting benefits to 700,000 people. So that's good. But on the other hand, there are still 2 SNAP cuts pending, and USDA spokespeople declined to say whether the department still planned to finalize eligibility changes that would shrink SNAP enrollment by 3 million. Meanwhile, in 8 different warehouses in the United States, Amazon workers have tested positive. Amazon is coming in with a massive increase in their sanitization processes and worker space. I mean, they just cannot run their business if they've got people falling down ill. And so, but some of the employees and contractors have signed an online petition saying that they're concerned about, quote, the company's lack of protective measures, and that they want paid sick leave and child care subsidies and hazard pay if they're having to interact with other people. And, Amazon is giving happy talk, but I think that they're going to have to do this. I mean, this is public health stuff. This is just basic science. Amazon on Monday said that they kicked nearly 4,000 third-party sellers off their platform and removed more than 500,000 product offerings because of price gouging during the coronavirus crisis. That's I suppose, good news. And the Senate, I don't think the vote has happened. No, the vote's going to happen in an hour or so in the Senate on this $2 trillion bill. But nobody expects it to fail. It only takes 60 votes. And then it's going to go to the House. But the House is out right now, so we'll find out more about what that means tomorrow when we talk to Congressman Mark Pocan. In the meantime, India has banned the export of, guess what? Hydrochloroquine. Yeah. Trump's wonder drug. It's made in India. They banned the export.
Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
In fact, they shut down their entire country Keep in mind, 95% of all our generic drugs come from either China or India. Do that.
Is the
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the L.A. Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that, though because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone, and of his own accord, would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. In this week's Science Revolution, yes, you're hearing me right. Big corporations, get in the effing line behind the rest of us human beings here. Both Joel Gamble and Professor Richard Wolff join me for a survival guide in a coronavirus economy. And Richard Hallam, author of Common Sense for the 21st Century, drops by to explain what is the Extinction Rebellion and what do they do. Check it out wherever you find great podcasts. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just a heads up, in the next hour, Curtis Ellis, who used to actually, like 15 years ago, used to fill in for me on this show. We were both on the same network at that time, the IE America Radio Network out of Detroit. It was owned by the UAW. And but he has since embraced the dark side. He's become a Trump humper. So he's going to drop by and tell us his thoughts on the stimulus bill or the bailout bill or whatever you want to call it. We'll get to that. But anyhow, picking up your calls here, Dion in Carl Junction, Missouri. Hey, Dion, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Good. Good. Need to get your microphone right next to your mouth on your phone. Just hold it right up.
I'm sorry.
Hold it right up to your mouth, please.
Can you hear me better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. A little background about me, before I ask my question. I'm a server in a high-end steakhouse. I do all the stuff I'm supposed to do. I buy insurance myself. I have a mortgage. I pay my bills on time. My restaurant's closed. There's no timetable for when it opens. This stimulus package does not include anything that will save me. Going forward, I have no idea what the business that I work in is going to be like. It's very hard right now for me to have any optimism about the future for me and my family. Mm-hmm. And I don't see anything in the short term that's going to turn any of this around. Do you see any optimism about what we could do going forward? Because I don't think any of our political leaders are leading anything.
I'm with you, Dion. I think it's just starting to sink in for the Republicans. I think the Democrats figured this out about a week ago. Nancy Pelosi has another stimulus bill that she's worked out in the House. You recall a week ago today on this program, I said to Congressman Pocan, who was talking about, hey, we just got this $840 billion stimulus bill out of the House, and it went over to the Senate, and they signed it, or they approved it, they voted for it, and Trump signed it. Isn't that great news? And I said, I think it's going to take between $10 and $14 trillion over the next 12 months in order to keep us whole, shall we say. And he seemed shocked by that. But we've already, if this bill passes the Senate this afternoon and the House comes back and votes it, the House will no doubt pass it. And if Trump signs it, even though it doesn't offer money for him and his hotels, we're up to $3 trillion. And now Nancy Pelosi has a brand new bill that she's going to be introducing into the House as soon as they come back into session for an additional $2 trillion. That takes us up to $5 trillion. So I still stand by my numbers. I think it's going to take 10 to 14 trillion dollars. And the way it's going to have to be done is the way that Italy is doing it, the way that Germany is doing it, the way that France is doing it, the way that Ireland is doing it, the way that Australia is doing it, which is that the federal government reaches out to the employers, in this case your steakhouse, and the employer says, here was my payroll last month. You know, we spent $450,000 on employees. That was our payroll last month. That would be, you know, maybe a company with 20, 30 employees. Here was our payroll last month. And the federal government will give them that amount of money, or say 80% of that amount of money. And then the company will continue making their payroll even though their people aren't working. That's the way it needs to be done. My understanding is that there's a good chunk of that in the bill that Nancy Pelosi has put together. This bill has a one-time payment of $1,200 per person. So if you're married, you get $2,400, and then I think it's $500 a kid. You know, that's going to get people sort of through for a few weeks. But the most optimistic thing about all of it, Dion, is that you're not alone in that boat. You are one of probably 20 to 30% of Americans who have a job right now who have found that they're out of work. We're seeing state after state. I shared on this program last week that Oregon's unemployment numbers, Oregon publishes them as soon as they compile them, which was a week and a half ago, and that Oregon's unemployment is up 3,200%. And the next day after that number was out, and I talked about it on the air, the next day the White House sent a directive around to the states saying, we don't want specific numbers anymore. We simply want you to use one of 5 categories. You know, unemployment is very high, unchanged, low, or very low, right? This is crazy, but they don't want the numbers. But the numbers are getting out. And what we're seeing is the unemployment increase on average across the states in the United States is 1,000%. So I think, frankly, you know, probably 30% of our workforce is out of work right now. I think we're going to see about 60% of our non-governmental workforce out of work within the next couple more weeks. And, you know, as more and more states adopt this. And that's going to create an enormous amount of pressure for the federal government to do the right thing, Dion. That's the most optimistic thing, that we might still function as a democracy when enough people start yelling and screaming. And that's why I encourage you to call your members of Congress. I realize you're in Missouri and you got Republicans. In fact, it's probably more urgent for you to call them. The number's 202-225-3121. So, does that help any?
I do that as well. It does. It does. It's, I mean, I'm just looking for any silver lining, but, you know, like you said, Missouri, we've gone dark red over the last decade, and they're living in my neighbors, my coworkers are living in an alternate reality created by Fox News and hate radio. And maybe this will break through that. That's all I can hope at this point, is that reality pierces the bubble.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think it will. I think it's, yeah, thank you, Dion. I mean, you know, Rand Paul, a fellow Republican senator, being diagnosed, you know, oh my God, this is real. We thought it was just a Democratic hoax, but it got a Republican. Oh my God, you know. So it's almost, you know, I was thinking about this last night. It's almost as if the planet, you know, look at the Gaia hypothesis. James Lovelock, this British scientist back in the 1950s, I believe it was, hypothesized that the planet is a living organism, and that and that we're all parts, we're all components of a living organism. I mean, it might be the bacteria and viruses of the planet, part of it. This one single system. Our body is nothing more than a system. You know, our liver does one thing, our kidneys do another thing, our stomach does something else, our brain. And, you know, it's a complex system. And we have consciousness. And Lovelock suggested that the planet itself has consciousness. Well, if the planet wanted to cause us to stop blowing pollution into the air, stop billions of cars from traveling on the roads, stop the 10,000 flights an hour all around the world, you know, dial that back to 300. Louise and I, when we take our walk after I get off the air, we've got this path. It's about a 1.5 mile, 2 mile walk, and part of it goes along the Columbia River. It's absolutely beautiful. But the Columbia River is the glide slope, or the glide path, for takeoffs and landings at the Portland airport here. And, by the time they get to us, they're kind of high up, but they're still loud, and you can still tell that they're there, and you can't ignore them. And, used to be, before the coronavirus, we'd walk along, and literally every 4 or 5 minutes, a plane would be taking off or landing. Yesterday, we went for our walk, and we were out there for 40 minutes, and we saw 3 planes take off from the Portland airport. I mean, so imagine that the planet said, we need to stop the carbon pollution. We need to stop the fracking. Because, by the way, this is putting the frackers out of business. We need the human population of the planet to realize that we're all in this together and to start building resilient systems that include nature. And we need the human portion of the planet to realize that when you screw with Mother Nature, when you start going into areas where there have never been humans before and harvesting things like bats or pangolins and then eating them, you are risking the entire human race. And the planet said, okay, so what's the smartest thing I can do? Well, how about we give them a virus that spreads faster than any virus in history and that kills 1 to 2, maybe 3% of the population. That will wake them the hell up, and it'll give my planet a reprieve for 24, 48 hours. So, I don't know if that's what happened. I'm not willing to discount it. I mean, I think it could just be coincidence. But life is going to be very different a year or 2 years from now. It's going to be very different all over the world. So, Scott in Lima, Ohio. Hey, Scott, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good.
I am a restaurant general manager, and we basically laid off most of our employees after the shutdown. A couple of us are still at work, but I'm seeing no change. Roads, being out and about, there's really not any difference after day 2 of Ohio being shut.
Really? People are still out, they're going to work, they're going to parties. Wow. That's bad news, Scott.
Yeah, everybody, they could be just going to the grocery store, but, with the mass amount of people in the last 2 weeks that have been at the grocery store, I couldn't imagine that everybody needs milk right now.
Yeah.
So
well, here in Portland, people are taking it seriously. I mean, both the city and the state have ordered a lockdown, and I can see Route 5 from the window of my home studio here, my home office, and it's like one car, there's another car. I mean, they're spaced about 1/10 of a mile apart. I mean, it's just, there's very, very little traffic here in Portland. This is rush hour, right? So it's 9:45 in the morning here in Portland. So hopefully that will be coming to Ohio, Scott. If it doesn't, your hospital emergency rooms are going to be overflowing. Thank you, Scott, for the call. We'll be right back.
Listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day, and boy, is there a bunch of it. And Curtis Ellis is going to be here at the top of the next hour. Stick around. It's going to get fascinating. And welcome back. Win in Salon, Maine. Hey, Win, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Soylent, Maine. Can you hear me?
Soylent. I do hear you.
Yeah.
What's up?
Okay, great. Okay. Let me just read you a quote that I actually heard at a party. And it is, they are eating our food. They are occupying our hospital beds and doctors. It's time to cull the herd. I wonder how much this plays into things that are going on. I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but I really wonder when we haven't, anybody that knows testing, I'm a scientist, and the type of testing we need to do is for data, which means random testing. You test everybody, not because they have symptoms. That way you can get a map. You can map, and that's what should have been done initially. And for the fact that was totally ignored, and that's standard protocol for any kind of testing like this. I really wonder.
South Korea was doing this by the second week after they had their first case. They had the first case the same day we did on January 20th. They had their test deployed by January 26th, and the following week they had tested tens of thousands of people.
Correct. I mean, it's an obvious method, and it's something you don't miss. but nobody even talks about it. And I've never heard a newscaster, anybody anywhere talk about random testing. Random testing is what you need. That's what gives you the information. You know, to test somebody that has symptoms, been exposed to somebody, well, yeah, you're testing people that you know probably do have it or may very well.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I heard the weirdest thing this morning on TV. They were interviewing one of the governors of one of the states, and he said, as far as we know, the coronavirus test doesn't test you positive unless you have symptoms. Now that is the opposite of what I've heard, and I'm sure that governor was wrong, and that's probably being used as a rationale in the states where they're still rationing tests. Yes. To justify
absolutely.
The rationing of the tests, because that way it doesn't look so bad for Trump. Yeah, okay.
I mean, that's obviously what's going on. So, you know, it makes me wonder, is there a larger thing going on here? Like I said, I'm not a conspiracy guy, but I did hear that. You know, and you know,
that's floating around in the right wing, particularly the right wing Christian circles. That this is a plague from God to strike the unbelievers, or this is going to hit particularly hard the homeless population, the urban population, largely black population that doesn't have good access to hospitals and things, or health care for that matter. You know, a lot of very poor people. Obviously, white people all across the country, but for some reason they go into amnesia about the fact that there's more poor whites than poor blacks. But the poor blacks will be hit in particularly hard because they tend to live in higher density areas, inner cities. And you know, this is being actually celebrated. There are neo-Nazi groups that are telling their people to go out, get infected. If you're young and healthy, go out and get infected, and then go spit on cops and Jews. Specifically, I'm surprised they're not saying black people. That'll probably be coming next. But you know, we actually have a Nazi group that got busted for this. So that's what's going on, Win. I'm with you. Win, thanks a lot for the call. Bizarre stuff. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, broadcasting live from my home office here in Portland, Oregon. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay safe, keep sheltered, and if you got cats, check out the cat porn on YouTube. We'll be right back. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. Got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit, and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson. And the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at ThomHartmann.com. With you and Ed in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Hey, Ed, what's up?
Hi, Tom. You know, I've been hearing a lot of people say that Trump's not doing a good job, but I've been listening to the TV around the world, like France and England and Spain and Germany, and everybody's saying that their leader is not doing a good job. They didn't pay attention soon enough, and they're not doing enough to get us, these are the nurses in hospitals and whatnot, saying he's not doing enough to get us masks and gloves, and we're exposed and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? Everybody's saying exactly the same thing because that's how it works when you're in a crisis.
Well, I don't know if this is true or not, Ed, and it's something that would be worth looking into. But we know that Donald Trump was warned about this In fact, he was warned about this when he came into office, the possibility of a pandemic, that he inherited two agencies, one in the National Security Council and one in the Department of Homeland Security, that had been put into place after the SARS epidemic and after the H1N1 flu in order to deal with this, and he dismantled both of them. We know that in January, actually in December, the U.S. spy agencies, which are not available to Italy and France and Spain, that the U.S. spy agencies were specifically telling Trump, this is real, it's breaking out in China, it will be here, we need to start getting ready. Trump ignored all of that. Well, I don't know if Italy and Spain had the kind of advance warning that we did, but we had the advance warning, and we had the systems in place to deal with it, and Trump took them apart. So, Ed, I'm not going with you, when you say, oh, Trump's no worse than any of the other leaders. I think he's far worse. We should be leading the world in this stuff. We shouldn't be, sitting back and saying, oh, well, Italy's just as bad. Sorry, Ed. Linda in Matlock, Washington. Hey, Linda, you have an update for us? You're a registered nurse, it says here.
Yeah, I am so happy to be in the state of Washington because Jay Inslee has really taken the lead on this. I'm a registered nurse for the state of Washington, and they instituted taking staff temperatures before we even enter our facility. They do that. Every employee that passes through the door, you're looking at the screening questions, they're taking your temperature every day. Right. And so far, and also Inslee also issued us letters that if we are encountering law enforcement while we are commuting to and from our jobs, that we actually do have authorization as emergency workers to be out on the roads, regardless of how locked down the state of Washington may be. So we're really trying to do what we can. My other thing is that I also do the purchasing of supplies, and through big suppliers like McKesson, they are limiting what you can actually buy. They're looking at your history and profile purchases. And if you're starting to purchase way too much, they have the right to either cancel your order or reduce your shipment. And this morning I was ordering thermometer probe covers, which are out of stock in the McKesson system. Hand sanitizer is limited, face masks are limited, and alcohol prep pads. So they are really monitoring the amount of stuff that people are actually able to buy off of even the distributorship level.
Wow, this is for nurses in hospitals and doc offices.
Yeah, for hospitals, yeah. And also there's a big staffing shortage in that one of our ICU nurses was actually recruited to go to Seattle for $150 an hour. And I've heard in
I heard
there's also some that,
I got an email last week from a nurse who said that up in Spokane there was a facility that was offering her $115 an hour to come to work. Apparently it's up to $150
they are
now.
Desperate.
Yeah. In terms of labor, I get it, and if somebody is walking into what could be death, I mean, this is what has Louise and I so concerned about. Two of our kids who are frontline healthcare workers. One is going to be rotating into the emergency room in a couple of weeks, and the other one could be called in, and it's just scary stuff. I mean, we all have to, hope that the hospitals, here can learn from the hospitals in Washington and be ready for this. It's going to be really tough. Linda, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Thanks for the heads up. Marcia in Winter Park, Florida. Hey, Marcia, what's up? Thanks for watching us on YouTube.
Well, I'm kind of with you. It's nice to talk to you again. I'm kind of with you on the whole Gaia idea. That wasn't what I was going to talk about. And you don't have to think about that in terms of a planet having consciousness. You can just think of it in terms of seeking balance for itself, just an organism.
Sure.
Seeking balance. Anyway, my questions, I don't know if you covered it already, but there was some element being discussed about this legislation that there would be some effort made to stop the bleeding first, where banks and mortgage moratoriums and interest accumulation, student loan piece. What do you know about that?
My understanding, I've seen in some cases conflicting reports because this has been negotiated over the last few days and it's gone back and forth, and nobody in the House of Representatives has even seen it yet. So everything we're learning is from, basically news releases from Chuck Schumer or, squeals of pain from right-wing Republicans. But my understanding is that it does place a moratorium on many of those things, but let's hold off on saying that with any certainty for a day or so. I think that the bill that Nancy Pelosi is working on in the House right now, this $2 trillion, this will take us up to $5 trillion, will start providing people with a couple $1,000s a month, every month on an ongoing basis. And that's really what we need. One-time stimulus packages for a long-term disaster are crazy. It might have made sense after 9/11. It was a short disaster. This is a long one. Marcia, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Hello, I'm Casey Hobbs.
And I'm Shane Mason.
We say fight back!
Got a new video up for regular supporters of our program at ThomHartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit, and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at ThomHartmann.com. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Fred Kaplan's new book, The Bomb: Presidents, Generals, and the Secret History of Nuclear War. This is from the introduction. For 30 years after the Cold War ended, almost no one thought, much less worried, about nuclear war. Now, almost everyone is fearful. But the fear takes the form of a vaguely paralyzed anxiety. Because of the long reprieve from the bomb's shadow, few people know how to grasp its dimensions. They've forgotten, if they ever knew. The holiday from history began on August 8th, 2017, when President Donald Trump, barely 6 months in office, told reporters at his golf resort in Bedminster, New Jersey, that if the North Koreans kept threatening the United States with harsh rhetoric and missile tests, quote, they would be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen, end quote. Even those who didn't remember President Harry Truman's similar description 72 years earlier of the atomic bomb that destroyed Hiroshima, Truman said, a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. It was clear that in language more bellicose than any president since the end of World War II, Trump was talking about launching nuclear weapons at North Korea. Not if its leader, Kim Jong-un, first attacked the United States, but merely if he developed the ability to do so. Then, 6 months later, Trump signed and released his administration's Nuclear Posture Review, a 74-page document that called for building new types of nuclear weapons and integrating them with the military's conventional war plans. In short, for treating nuclear weapons as normal. The red lights flashed. The alarm bells rang furiously. Yet here is what few recognized. None of these notions were new. The president himself seemed a departure from the norm. His character, erratic, eruptive, thin-skinned, willfully uninformed, a combustive mix for a world leader with his finger on the button. But the button and everything around it were the same. In those decades when most of us chose to forget the bomb, as global tensions calmed and fallout shelters crumbled and we turned our gaze to other problems and pleasures, The nuclear war machine continued to rumble forth in the beyond top secret chambers of the Pentagon, the Strategic Command Headquarters in Omaha, the weapons labs in various parts of the country, and the think tanks whose denizens never stopped thinking about the unthinkable. They all kept at their singular task, wrestling with the dilemmas posed by the bomb's existence. How to deter nuclear war, how to fight a nuclear war if it cannot be deterred, how to win it if such a thing is even possible. This is the nature of the nuclear era, and the era never drifted into suspension, even if our attention did. Trump snapped us out of our slumber, reminded those of us who were old enough to know, and informed those who weren't that the bomb is still here. In public over the years, officers and officials have described America's nuclear policy as a second strike deterrence. If an enemy strikes us with nuclear weapons, we will retaliate in kind. This retaliatory power is what deters the enemy from attacking us. In reality, though, American policy has always been to strike first preemptively, or in response to a conventional invasion of Allied territory, or to a biological or large-scale cyber attack. In any case, not just as an answer to nuclear attack. All of these options envision firing nuclear weapons at military targets for military ends. They envision the bomb as a weapon of war writ large. This vision has been enshrined in the American military's doctrines, drills, and exercises from the onset of the nuclear era through all its phases. Most presidents have been skeptical of this vision, morally, strategically, practically, but none of them have rejected it. Some have threatened to launch nuclear weapons first as a way of settling a crisis. The few who considered adopting a no first use policy, in the end, decided against it. There are rationales for these doctrines, drills, and exercises, and for the retention of the first use option. They are driven by policies, personalities, and bureaucratic rivalries, but also by a logic which, once its premises are accepted, hurls its adherents and the rest of us into a rabbit hole of increasingly bizarre scenarios that seem increasingly, if strangely, rational the deeper they're probed. Understanding the nuclear era, the era of our lifetime, means understanding the rabbit hole, who dug it, and how we got stuck inside. It means tracing the maze of its tunnels, which is to say the arc of its history. A story enmeshed in secrecy, some of it still secret, much of it now illuminated by declassified documents and interviews with key actors, though never fully told. How did we get to this second coming of nuclear panic? How did we wind up with thousands of nuclear weapons, far more than any war aims could justify? What propelled the nuclear arms race during the decades-long Cold War? And what happened to the weapons and their guardians after the Cold War ended? And how and why did any of this persist? This is the Thom Hartmann Book Club, the book Fred Kaplan's The Bomb.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is Curtis Ellis. He is the policy director at America First Policies, A1APAC, A1APAC.org is the website. You can tweet him at Curtis W. Ellis, spelled just like it seems it would be. Curtis, welcome back to the program. It's been a while.
Yeah, it sure has been. Nice to talk with you again, Tom.
Thank you. You have, I believe you worked with the Trump transition team in 2016, and you worked on the Trump campaign, and you've been working with the Trump folks for some time. And you have some problems with this stimulus bill that just passed the Senate. Tell us about it.
Well, I think everybody has some problems with this stimulus bill that just passed the Senate. look, we want to make sure that the people, the working people of America, the small businesses are taken care of, are made whole. We have what someone might call an unfunded government mandate, shut down for good reason, social distance. Don't go to work, shut down your restaurant, shut down your business, don't let people through the door. Well, that costs money. I still have to pay the rent. I still have to pay the mortgage. I still have to put food on the table. We want to make sure people are taken care of, but the Sharpies on Wall Street, the gangster banksters, we don't want them to get fatter and richer off of this. So we want to make sure that the money goes to where it's needed and it doesn't go to the same old, providing lines of credit for big businesses to take over struggling small businesses that are being starved for credit. And we also don't want to see the usual wish list of, Green New Deal, forced re-education camps for diversity managers, et cetera, in every Fortune 50 company.
So let me get this straight, Curtis. What you like about this legislation is the stuff that the Democrats put in there that extends unemployment benefits, that extends loan forgiveness, that expands unemployment benefits by $600 a month, that gives money to people. What you object to is what the Republicans had demanded, which was initially a $500 billion slush fund that would be secretly administered by Steve Mnuchin with exclusive oversight by Donald Trump. And Trump himself said day before yesterday, I'll be the oversight. You object to that Republican proposal that was moderated by the Democrats to say, well, okay, if you're going to administer this slush fund, you at least have to publish who you gave the money to. And there's going to be an oversight board that's appointed by the president. I mean, it's going to be a joke anyway. But so you're objecting to the Republican part of this. You're on board with the Democratic part of this. I don't understand why you're calling this pork barrel, number one. And number two, I don't get how you can be, all Trump humping and saying that you're with the Democrats.
Well, I think you're putting words in my mouth there, Tom. I think it's incredibly naive to split it up into Democrat versus Republican. Last I checked, Chuck Schumer's a Democrat, and he signed off on this monstrosity. And look, you look at
only after the Republican corporate giveaways were taken out.
2009. You look at the TARP bailout from 2009. You saw a lot of the same deformities and monstrosities that may be showing up in this thing, and that was heralded and shepherded through and sherped by a Democrat. So let's not get naive here. It ain't about Democrat versus Republican. It's about corporatists versus
Actually, it is, Curtis.
Small guys.
Actually, it is.
So
no, the Trump administration is still. The Trump administration announced yesterday that they're moving full steam ahead, was their phrase, for significant cuts in Social Security. Trump's budget is still proposing huge cuts in Medicare and Medicaid. They want to dial back the ability of people to get food stamps. The SNAP program is looking at major cuts. They have reaffirmed yesterday all that's still going on.
The SNAP program.
All of that's still going on, and the Democrats.
Men without children. Come on, Tom. Let's be honest here.
And you're saying that able-bodied men without children should not be able to get food when they can't even get a job?
Having a work requirement, able-bodied men with no dependents. Now, don't turn it into the sky is falling. They're going to starve everybody. You're starting to sound like...
So how many able-bodied men with no dependents do you know, Curtis?
Not everybody's
Curtis, how many able-bodied men with no dependents do you know who you think should be out there trying to find a job and not be eligible for food stamps in this environment when, in many of these states, the governors have shut the states down?
And when that proposal, this is a different environment.
But they're still standing by that proposal.
Months ago.
They announced yesterday they're moving full speed ahead with it. They're going to throw millions of people, 3 million people off food stamps because they're able-bodied men with no dependents. Really?
Yeah, well,
now?
Look, and Nancy Pelosi wants to have re-education camps for diversity training and same-day voting, and anybody can cast my ballot for me, and all kinds of other nonsense. It's called negotiation. You throw everything in the yard, and then you clean it up and settle on something that works. And I want to make sure that the small business people, the working people, the people who work for the small businesses, the people who work for the big businesses get paid, but that the bankers and the investment bankers and the private equity vulture capitalists don't walk away with our entire economy when this whole thing is over. because that's the real danger here.
All areas of agreement
between with me on that is that we'll see the entire
I do, but that's not what the Republicans proposed. What the Republicans proposed was a $500 billion slush fund that was administered by Steve.
Like Trump. It's not about Republicans
but the
Democrats.
Republicans proposed, Curtis, what the Republicans proposed was a $500 billion slush fund that would be administered exclusively by the Secretary of the Treasury, the foreclosure king from California, Steve Mnuchin, with exclusive oversight by one man, Donald Trump.
Are you telling me Chuck Schumer didn't sign off on this, or has he joined the Republican Party?
Chuck Schumer objected to that. That's why it's taken 4 days to do this, and they finally backed off on it. But you just said something about letting anybody cast by ballot for me. Are you signing off on this Republican plan to not allow states to do vote by mail in the 17 states where you need an excuse from a doctor to get an absentee ballot? They're almost all Republican states.
What are they voting for?
President of the United States.
What, in the primary?
No, I'm talking about the general election. This is Ron Wyden and Earl Blumenauer. Yeah.
You're talking about November. Yeah, well, let's see what happens in November before we litigate widespread voter fraud. I think that's a good idea. I'm all for election.
Why not let everybody in the country vote by mail, Curtis? It works. It works all over the world. It's been working here in Oregon for a decade.
Voter fraud. That is an invitation for voter fraud. They're not just saying vote by mail. They're saying everybody gets an absentee ballot and anybody can return that ballot. That's what they're saying. That's what's in the bill.
The same penalties apply. You have to. No, Curtis, there is biometric testing on these things. There is, Curtis, take a breath for a second. Take a breath for a second. There is biometric. Take a breath for a second, Curtis. We have Sean, pot down, Curtis, please. We have state-of-the-art biometric testing. That ballot that was returned by you was actually signed. It's comparison of signatures. When you register to vote, you give them a signature. When the ballot comes in, you compare the signature with the voting rolls. It's done by a real person. Signatures are harder to fake than IDs. Curtis, back to you.
Am I allowed to talk now, Tom?
You are.
Can you
try and
hear
talk
me,
over
Tom?
me. It doesn't do either of us any good. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on and letting me talk. That's very nice of you. So if you place your faith in the biometric testing administered by the government, good for you. I'm old-fashioned.
Well, you place your faith in phony IDs administered.
I like voting by paper, put it in a box, let it be counted, and let's do it that way.
Got it. Curtis Ellis. The website is a1apac.org, and Curtis's Twitter handle is @CurtisWLO. Curtis, thanks for dropping by.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. We'll be back in just a moment. Stick around. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So how do you think this is all going to shake out? It's bizarre. I don't think the Republicans figured out how serious this is. We'll be back. And welcome back. Fair in Stoddard, New Hampshire. Hey, Fair, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Well, I've just been thinking that if we don't all shelter in place for 3 weeks in this country and have a continuance policy and an order to do that, that we're not going to be able to open our economy, really. At the end of some hodgepodge, state by state, everybody's doing it differently.
No, and then I'm with you, and it's going to be more like 3 months than 3 weeks.
That what?
I said it's going to be more like 3 months than 3 weeks. Look at the experience in China. It's going to be 3 months, not 3 weeks.
If we all shelter in place for 3 weeks, those of us that had the virus would get sick in that time, and we wouldn't be passing it around to society. It would give medical, that manufacture the the equipment that hospitals need, a time to catch up maybe and get that in place.
Yep.
We would know there'd be a lot more testing. We could test the people that we thought were sick and everybody that came into contact with them. You know, because if you have everything in motion, then it's impossible to keep track of it. So that's why if everybody had stayed in place, then we would be able to get a handle on it. And I'm afraid, Trump is the one that closed planes coming to this country. Other countries are going to keep our planes from coming to their country because if they're responsible and get their virus
Several
under
countries have
control,
announced that.
They have.
Yeah, that they're shutting down planes from the United States. They're putting us on the list along with China as a hotspot.
Yeah. Well, we are a hot spot. So I just think, put the fear into the Trump administration. They've got this kind of, immediate gratification. Let's open by Easter. And it's completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's going to backfire on them.
Yeah,
So,
I think you're absolutely right, and these are the considerations we've got to look at. Thank you, Fair. Spot on. Benjamin in Jackson, Mississippi. Hey, Benjamin. Thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Well, it's something maybe you could explain to me. I watched an interview with Nancy Pelosi the other day on MSNBC, and they pretty much gave her an open mic to reply to, any criticism of her bills and everything. And I was just curious, maybe you could explain to me, while people are needing food, needing money, needing, relief and all this, why it's so important to include $350 million for the Kennedy Center, for same-day registration, for diversity boards to be set up on every company that accepted a loan, not a bailout, but these are loans. These are not free money.
Right.
As I understand it, the Democrats are wanting free money to go to cities and not corporations. So is that not a slush fund as well? Or a bailout?
Let's create a diversity, issue for our boards. I mean, these are structural changes that really should be debated independent of the virus, in my opinion. They are. It is a good thing, though. It's happened in countries all around the world. There's so much racism in this country, and it's so permeated the corporate culture that's a good thing. But whether it should be in these bills, I can't defend that. We'll be back. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. We have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program. And the essence of it is, I use a couple of examples. There's hundreds of them out there. In one case, Alabama is preparing to execute a man who was not guilty of the crime that he committed with a relatively high level of certainty, but still they're gonna kill this guy, an African American. And the other story out of New York State, where the police officers hogtied this guy, arms, elbows behind him, tied his legs together, and then threw him down a flight of stairs, mangled his face. He looked he was totally beaten. 12 hours later, he commits suicide in his cell. How is it possible that our prisons do this kind of stuff? Because the 13th Amendment says that slavery is still legal in the United States. You have no rights if you've been convicted of a crime. We need to amend the Constitution. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. of air every certain number of seconds.
Exactly. Now, you're familiar with the Ambu bags, the hand-operated bags.
All the ones that
EMTs
use.
Yes. All you need to do is build a machine that will pump that bag.
Right. Yeah.
On a regular
that's
basis.
A possibility too. There's a lot of things that could be done. Jim, thank you for that. Marcy in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Hey, Marcy, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. First of all, I just want to thank you for everything you do. I love the way you handle some of the loud Republicans when they're just spitting out rhetoric. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just want to say this. Mississippi has nothing really in place for this virus. The governor did order the schools to shut down. I'm a teacher, so the children are, at home, supposedly. But our attitude, we should take the same stance that New York is having. People are walking around, Tom, like nothing's going on. It's a holiday. And even though our cases are low right now, we have 20, I think, known cases. But I'm right on the Gulf Coast. So we're right in between Louisiana, Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. And I know it's just a matter of time because we don't have enough testing going on. It's just a matter of time before fatalities start to rise. And I just think everybody should look at New York, follow them so that we can stop this virus, because this is the thing. If everybody's dead, what's the use of having an economy when you don't have any people?
Or even if 1% of your people are dead and 20% of them are in a hospital.
Exactly. So how can you worry about, the economy when you don't have any people to work? Look, Republicans, you need the poor people or the regular people to keep the economy going because we're the ones that spend. So if you don't give us, the workers, money and cutting down food stamps and all of this stuff, the economy will not work because mostly rich people are hoarders. So
you're absolutely right, Marcy. Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. We're going to see, and we're going to see this in probably a week and a half, that spring break in Florida infected that entire state, but not only infected that state, but blew the infection out across the United States, particularly into the red states where young people, hey, let's go to Florida. We're not watching MSNBC, we're watching Fox News. This is just the flu. And New Orleans, Mardi Gras. Those two things are going to be the things that take us down. Brian in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hi. I keep seeing the stories about Trump's approval rating going up through this, and the way I see it, his actions leading up to this, with getting rid of the guy, the doctor embedded in China, and so on and so forth. But his numbers should be plummeting, and I'm hoping you can comment on it and talk me off a ledge, because the only silver lining that I can see from this is that he gets removed from office because of this, but that's not happening. Somehow he's more popular, just a little bit.
The media has amnesia. The media has amnesia. They should be pointing out every single day that Trump had intelligence that this was coming in December. Trump had the public knowledge. The entire nation had public knowledge that this was coming in January. We had our first case the same day South Korea did. They did something about it. Trump decided to go golfing. And for 2 months, Trump just kept going golfing every couple days. And as South Korea got their situation under control and tested hundreds of thousands of people and figured out where their hot spots were and shut them down, the United States did nothing. And so now you've got New York melting down. You're going to soon have Florida melting down. I mean, this needs to be repeated over and over and over by the media, Brian. I'm with you. It's like they're getting amnesia, and that is not a healthy thing, because we need to remember, it's partisan. No, it's not partisan. It's a single administration. If it was a Democratic administration that had screwed this up this badly, I would be yelling about them too. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. I got an update for you from New York about morgues. It's not looking good. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Medical Apartheid, the Dark History of Medical Experimentation on Black Americans from Colonial Times to the Present by Harriet A. Washington. This is from the introduction. On a sylvan stretch of New York's patrician Upper Fifth Avenue, just across from the New York Academy of Medicine, a colossus in marble, august inscriptions, and a bas-relief caduceus grace a memorial bordering Central Park. These laurels venerate the surgeon James Marion Sims, M.D., as a selfless benefactor of women. Nor is this the only statuary erected in honor of Dr. Sims. Marble monuments to his skill, benevolence, and humanity guard his native South Carolina's State House, its medical school, the Alabama Capitol grounds, and a French hospital. In the mid-19th century, Dr. Sims dedicated his career to the care and cure of women's disorders and opened the nation's first hospital for women in New York City. He attended French royalty, his Grecian visage inspired oil portraits, and in 1875 he was elected president of the American Medical Association. Hospitals still bear his name, including a West African hospital that utilizes the eponymous gynecological instruments that he at first invented for surgeries upon black female slaves in the 1840s. But this benevolent image vies with the detached Marion Sims portrayed in Robert Thom's J. Marion Sims, Gynecological Surgeon, an oil representation of an experimental surgery upon his powerless slave, Betsy. Sims stands aloof, arms folded, one hand holding a metroscope, the forerunner of the speculum, as he regards the kneeling woman in a coolly evaluative medical gaze. His tie and morning coat contrast with her simple servant's dress, head rag, and bare feet. The painting, commissioned and distributed by the Park Davis Pharmaceutical House more than a century after the surgeries, as one of its History and Medicine in Pictures series, takes telling liberties with the historical facts. Thom portrays Betsy as a fully clothed, calm slave woman who kneels complacently on a small table, hand modestly raised to her breast before a trio of white male physicians. Two other slave women peer around a sheet, apparently hung for modesty's sake, in a childlike display of curiosity. This innocuous tableau could hardly differ more from the gruesome reality in which each surgical scene was a violent struggle between the slaves and physicians, and each woman's body was a bloodied battleground. Each naked, unanesthetized slave woman had to be forcibly restrained by the other physicians through her shrieks of agony as Sims determinedly sliced, then sutured her genitalia. The other doctors who could fled when they could bear the horrific screams no longer. It then fell to the women to restrain one another. I wanted to reproduce Thom's painting on the cover of this book, or at least in the text, but when I asked permission of its copyright holder, Pfizer Incorporated, the company insisted on reviewing the entire manuscript of this book before making a decision. As an independent scholar, I could not acquiesce to this, and I used another cover image. When I renewed my request to use the image within the text, Pfizer agreed to base its decision upon reading this chapter and an outline of the book. The Pfizer executives apparently were uncomfortable with what they read because they refused to grant permission to reproduce this telling image or even respond to my query after I supplied the requested chapter and outline. This act of censorship exemplifies the barriers some choose to erect in order to veil the history of unconscionable medical research with blacks. Betsy's voice has been silenced by history, but as one reads Sims' biographers and his own memoirs, a haughty, self-absorbed researcher emerges, a man who bought black women slaves and addicted them to morphine in order to perform dozens of exquisitely painful, distressingly intimate vaginal surgeries. Not until he had experimented with his surgeries on Betsy and her fellow slaves for years did Sims essay to cure white women. Was Sims a savior or a sadist? It depends, I suppose, on the color of the women you ask. Marion Sims epitomizes the two faces, one benign, one malevolent, of American medical research. Quote, of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane. In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke those words in Montgomery, Alabama, at the end of the Selma to Montgomery march that had been attended by the black and white physicians of the Medical Committee for Human Rights. King had invited the doctors not only to give medical help to injured marchers, but also to witness the abuse suffered at the hands of segregationists. With these almost unnoticed words, King ushered in a new era in civil rights because, as Delegate to Congress Donna Christensen Christian, MD, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust, has declared, health disparities are the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Thus, Dr. King's alarm over racial health injustice was prescient, and were he alive today, his concerns would be redoubled. Mounting evidence of the racial health divide confronts us everywhere we look, from doubled black infant death rates to African-American life expectancies that fall years behind whites. Infant mortality of African-Americans is twice that of whites. The book, Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington. In this week's Science Revolution, yes, you're hearing me right. Big corporations, get in the effing line behind the rest of us human beings here. Both Joel Gamble and Professor Richard Wolff join me for a survival guide in a coronavirus economy. And Richard Hallam, author of Common Sense for the 21st Century, drops by to explain what is the Extinction Rebellion and what do they do. Check it out wherever you find great podcasts. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. Cat porn. Cat porn update. I went downstairs and our cat, who started watching this video of birds at 7 o'clock in the morning, is still watching them. Our youngest, he's 2 years old, and he's still sort of kitten-ish. So that's going on. It's pretty funny. Tom in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi. I got two short phrases, memes, that fit into our current story. One is your money or your life.
All right.
And the other one is wash your hands of this. We're washing our hands of virus, but we should be washing our hands of war. We should be, the phrase goes all the way back to Pilate, which is appropriate for Easter. It's such a beautiful day.
Yeah.
Pilate washing his hands of responsibility for the crucifixion.
Executing Jesus, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just tossing those out for you to riff on. But
okay, I think they're great, Tom. Let me put them in the biocomputer and see what pops out shortly. Thank you for the call. By the way, this report from New York City, the Department of Homeland Security has been briefed that New York City's morgues are nearing capacity. Now, the federal government, after 9/11, had provided them with morgue assistance. There's a program in HHS called the Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Teams, DMORT. Basically portable mortuaries and morticians. Haven't heard from Trump whether he's going to do anything about that. He did say yesterday or the day before that he would help out New York if they would be nice to me. Really? David in Spotwood, New Jersey. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I remember in the 2008 financial crisis, Ben Bernanke had the fortitude to talk about the risk to deflation. Nobody's talking about it today. I mean, not even economists or commentators on TV. And I'd like to just give a quick example. I read in a book once that in Thailand, if a paint factory moved close to a river and was dumping paint, turpentine into the river, the people around the river would stop spending because they anticipated getting sick. So if they open up the country on April 19th, first of all, it's going to be a logistics problem for every HR department, because when somebody gets sick, they're going to have to find out who that person had contact with and then send those people home. That's not going to be very good for morale, and it's also going to set a stage of a cycle of deflation. First, people will get afraid of being sick. Then when prices go down, nobody will want to buy because then they'll want to get the product at a lesser good. What will happen is the suppliers will go out of business, and then we'll have a hyperinflation afterwards. I don't hear anybody talking about it.
Yeah, I don't know about the hyperinflation afterwards, but what I'm seeing right now,
well, there'll be a
David,
lack of suppliers. Suppliers would go out of business.
Yeah, but that doesn't cause hyperinflation. What causes hyperinflation
is
a lack.
Inflation
is okay. Go ahead, David.
Too few goods.
Yeah, my point. But it's not just too few goods. It's too few goods that are essential to the functioning of the economy. That's a really important caveat. When you had the massive food shortages in Zimbabwe, when Robert Mugabe came in and basically changed who could own farms. The outcome of that over the short term was that people who didn't know how to farm owned the farms and food wasn't produced, and there was a massive famine. What that did is it jacked the price of food so high because food was essential to the economy that I think the dollar was their currency, the Zimbabwean form of it. It experienced 10,000 times of inflation. Here in the United States, we saw this in the 1970s when the Arabs cut off our oil. The price of oil went up. Everything in the United States runs on oil. But the inability of a hardware supplier to get rid of all the wood that they've got in stock is going to drive down wood prices. You're going to see deflation there. But the inability of them to get more over the short term, but over the long term, the inability of them to get more wood into the supply chain is not going to cause hyperinflation. What we're seeing is selective inflation and deflation. Louise has been trying to order vegetables online, and she's watching her carts actually the price going up throughout the day, right? As stores they're not doing the massive price gouging that Amazon is kicking people off for, but you're seeing 5, 10, 15% increases in food.
I was saying
and you're going to see a decrease in everything else. Yeah, but I think that after, I think where your deflation is going to show up first, and it's going to be a real risk to America, I agree with you on that, is in housing. Nobody's going around looking at houses to buy. Nobody wants strangers coming into their house to buy a house. That entire market is shut down. And over the short term, I'm guessing you're going to see deflation there. You're going to see housing price.
Well, the salt issue doesn't. The salt issue doesn't help with the housing. In other words, in states like in the Northeast and in California, people don't get the benefit of their state and local real estate taxes. Also, 3 of those states, California, Illinois, New Jersey, and Connecticut, have pension liability problems. So in those states, there's going to have to be increases in taxes and austerity measures in order to make the pension payments.
Yeah, or the states, or what's going to happen, Dave, is that the states are going to issue bonds, and the Fed is going to buy those bonds. Because right now, states and local governments can't sell their bonds. And I'm guessing that a lot of right now the Fed has announced that they're going to spend up to $4 trillion buying back corporate bonds. I'm guessing state bonds are going to be a piece of that. David, thanks for the call. Susan in Alachua, Florida? Alachua.
Alachua.
Go ahead.
Alachua.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome. Thank you for taking my call. What I want to know is there anything in this stimulus plan to help seniors? For years, we have been getting Social Security, and so our checks have gone up by minuscule amounts, but still, we are the ones who have disposable spending, and we have been propping up the economy for years because, we get money. We're not relying on an employer. We get money, and so we can go to the restaurants. We can buy high-end food. We can do whatever we're taking the trips, but I don't see us getting any, notice about this. And they're trying to take Social Security away from us. And if they do that, then who's going to be spending money?
Right. Well, let me address that, Susan. Number one, ever since 1935, when Social Security got rolled out, what we have seen is that Social Security has been a shock absorber for the economy. Economic downturns aren't as bad. Economic upturns are not as radical because you've got a bunch of people on Social Security who are basically living on that Social Security, number one. Number two, you said, people on Social Security have extra disposable income. That's probably true for a small percentage of people on Social Security. It's true for me. I'm getting Social Security, and it's like free money, extra money, because I also have a small income from this radio show, which, although that's probably going to zero this month, and months going forward, we're going to protect our employees first, always. Even if they get sick, we're going to do everything we can to protect our employees. But, I'm not sure every other company is run that way. But in any case, I'm in that category. But I know that my wife's mother, for example, who's almost 90 years old, is getting, I believe, about $800 a month. I don't know how you even live on that. So, but, number three, to answer your direct question, if you're on Social Security, what's in it for me? I believe, and again, we haven't seen this legislation. We don't know all the details, but it looks like this $1,200 one-time check or $2,400 per couple that's going to be going out will be going to all Social Security recipients as well. So, there's a small silver lining in that. Did all that make sense, Susan?
Yes, you do. And you always make sense. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. It's great to hear from you, Susan. Let's see, 44:55. Looks to me like I have a minute left here, so let's get Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I'm hanging in there. Stay safe, everybody. And I was just so upset at both the Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who says that we should sacrifice people 70 years and older. You're not sacrificing my parents or my family members, for that matter. All right, I'm just so outraged, and these are the same people who claim to be Christians and pro-life and all that stuff. I'm not going to go into that because you only have a few minutes left. But as far as Trump's statement saying that he'll only help those who bow down to him, understand this: if any Trump supporters are listening, I am not bowing down, and I am not kissing your rump, Trump. So forget about it. Do your damn job and stop with this criminal ransom and hostage crap.
I am with you, Michael. It's like he's the golden calf here, or at least he thinks he's the golden calf, and he wants all of us to come up and bow down and, like you said, kiss his Trump rump. Yeah, no, it is politically anyway. It's criminal. I mean, I don't know that there are specific laws that he's broken. Although Letitia James in New York seems to be hot on the trail of several of them. But Michael's spot on. Brilliant, well said, passionate. I love it. Thank you. 45 minutes past the hour. Donald Trump. I got to tell you what's going on with India too. Not just the shutdown. It goes beyond that, and it's going to affect all of us, I believe. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Speaking the truth, the multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know all about. And welcome back. Paul in Portland. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I wanted to elaborate on your when you were talking about how the planet is possibly rebelling. I firmly believe that every living thing on this planet is indigenous to this planet, and that the human species, being the dominant species, is obligated to take care of it. And every living thing on this planet has the right to be here, the right to thrive, and the right to propagate. And I just want to make that statement, and I'll take my answer offline.
No, I think you're right, Paul, and I think that in Genesis, we're called to be stewards of the earth, and that's been interpreted as dominators and owners, and instead it should be interpreted as the parties who have some responsibility because of our consciousness to do right by the earth rather than wrong by the earth. So I'm with you on that, and I think it's a really important point. Thank you, Paul, for the call. Robert in Portland. Hey, Robert, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I saw something on the internet yesterday, and I thought it was actually a really good idea, and that is to be relieving the student debt for nurses that are currently working on during this pandemic. I think that's just a great idea. I mean, you know,
I think we need to relieve the student debt for everybody. It's $1.5 trillion. We could just eliminate that problem and free an entire generation from debt for the same amount as Donald Trump paid for his damn tax cuts for billionaires.
Well, I agree with that. I agree with that, but it is. And I think that, I mean, right now, of anybody that should have student debt relieved right now would be the nurses. Right now. I mean, that could be just, you know. But anyways,
and new docs and physician's assistants and, you know, respiratory therapy. Anybody in the medical field, sure, yeah. But I don't think we should limit it to the medical field. The problem with limiting student debt is that now you've got people who have got to fill out forms to prove that they're eligible and prove their eligibility. And if you just eliminated student debt tomorrow and said to all of the companies that are making money off student debt, we're just, you know, first of all, about half of it is federal loans. You could just zero those out. And the other half of it is private corporations. And you simply say to the private corporations, you're not going to make any profit going forward because we're paying this loan off in full, but we're paying it off in full. And you're out of business now. Go find something else to sell.
Beautiful. Love it, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I really think that that's the way it has to be done, that if we don't do this, you know, if we don't do this right, the student debt thing. Anyhow, Steve in Everett, Washington. Hey, Steve, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Yeah, you just were talking to Chris about, you know, voting by mail. I live in Washington, and we do that, and it works out really well, and it's good. But it's all about labels, you know. When he sits there and says that is voter fraud, what really is voter fraud is voter suppression. That is voter fraud, where they're knocking off people that have the legal right to vote just because they're brown or black or in an undesirable area.
Yep. Although you can't, that's not voter fraud, that's election fraud. There's a distinction between the two. And, you know, the people running the elections are committing fraud, and they're claiming that the people who are showing up to vote in those elections are committing fraud, when in fact that's just simply not the case. That's what it comes down to. But your point's well made, Steve. Your point is very well made, and particularly as a rebuttal to Curtis Ellis. I totally get it. It's 10 minutes before the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back. Stick around. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Mike in Detroit, Michigan. Hey, Mike, what's up?
How you doing, Tom?
Good. What's
Tom, I got a real problem with all of this stimulus or this recovery bill or whatever you want to call it. I'm just so confused, and I'll guarantee it's not laid out in detail in this bill how this money is supposed to get dispersed. You're going to be giving everybody, I mean, you talk to the lady, okay, you're giving seniors checks.
It's everybody who makes less than 150 grand.
Wait a minute.
But the question is,
give me a chance to explain.
Go ahead, okay.
You're giving everybody checks. Then you're going to give the employers money to pay their employees, even though we're giving them money to get by. You're going to bail out all these other companies. You know, there's just so much of it that this is so ripe with going to be corruption and fraud in it. And you're talking all these hotels and golf courses and.
So, Mike, if you can do this without corruption and fraud, would you still want to do it? No, I'm sorry. I'm not going to wait a minute. Thanks a lot for the call, Mike. John in Gig Harbor, Washington. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom.
Hey, what's up?
Everything's okay there. So, I've been tracking numbers of COVID-19 cases in the United States, in particular on the Johns Hopkins website, which I think you're familiar with. And I went to put the numbers in last night. I've been trying to do it every 24 hours, and I've been calculating the rates of transmission, though I'm no epidemiologist. Anyway, yesterday's numbers at my closing time were well below what they should have been based on the tracking numbers that I had been calculating from days.
Because we're not testing.
And it didn't. And it was around 55,000 and some change last night, and there was only 200 more reported this morning, about 12 hours later when I looked at it. So, yeah, we're not getting reports anymore or something. It isn't just that we're not testing. The government or somebody is not reporting, and it's not being picked up by that website. I don't know if they're getting their numbers for the United States.
I can tell you what's happening here in Oregon, Patrick. It might be illuminating. Kate Brown, the governor, had been publishing every day. I'm on the mailing list. It comes through the Department of Public Health. They've got a newsletter. Every day they come out with a newsletter that says, here's how many people have it. Here's how many people have died. We had 19 people die yesterday, I believe. Excuse me. No, I don't have it. And just thinking about it makes me cough, right? And here's the counties where people were infected and how many were infected in each county. So that comes out every day. But there were a few days there last week where they didn't have the numbers. And the reason that they didn't, and they were, and the governor's office was taking flack for this. And it turned out that the reason why they didn't have the numbers was because most of the testing had shifted from government labs, where they instantly knew all their own numbers because they were doing it in-house, from government labs to private labs. And the private labs were not reporting the numbers in a way that the government could track. I believe that they have cleaned that up because now they're publishing the numbers again here in Oregon. And I assume that those numbers include the private labs as well as the government labs. That our governor's been very proactive on this, and she was ahead of the curve in many, many ways. I mean, Washington is right next door to us, right? You've got, and plus we had this outbreak in an old folks home here, in a VA old folks home, and that's where most of the deaths in the state have come from. So I think that she's getting her act together in that regard, but I'm guessing a lot of other states, they've got private labs doing the majority of their testing, and those numbers are not getting reported by the state health department. So that might account for it, John. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So maybe it's just a little blip. But anyway, I was concerned that
Hopefully.
It was a very small number reported over 12 hours, which is just weird because it's been working right along exponentially, just as CDC has been saying. And anyway.
Well, maybe also you've got some states that are only reporting once a day at the end of the day. John, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the call, and thanks for sharing your information. Joyce in Bensonville, Illinois. Hey, Joyce, thanks for watching us on Facebook Live. What's up?
Hi, Tom. It's great to hear you every day. You're so informative, and we all appreciate it. I just wanted to let everyone know that Bernie has been doing town halls live on Facebook, and like last night, he had several medical doctors that had great information, even as far as mental health and what to do in those circumstances, and just so much information about what's going on in the Senate as far as this bill is concerned. And I really think he is very presidential. That's all I can say.
I agree, and he's been doing a great job. Joyce, thanks. And for Joe Biden followers, Joe Biden is starting to do regular stuff too. I don't know if it's on Facebook Live, probably is. Danny in New Orleans. Hey, Danny, you guys are about to get hit with something awful.
You're exactly right, Tom.
Very careful.
Yeah, and I am being very careful. I'm staying at home. So what you were saying earlier, Mardi Gras is going to be a vector because that was held on February 25th. It was still a distant enough threat. I saw a couple people in coronavirus costumes, but that didn't age well. But even after that, a lot of people around here still weren't taking it very serious when the bigger warnings started coming down. And if you've ever been to New Orleans, we are definitely not a Trump city, just a carefree city, and a city that's used to being able to party as a release during a crisis. So the bars were kind of still packed up until the weekend before St. Patrick's Day. And at that point, the mayor started pulling the plugs on some of the Irish and Italian parades that weekend. But they still went ahead with a large block party, carefree. And then also, a lot of us here in the service industry, I'm a tour guide, bartenders, waiters, we're like, let's get what we can before they shut us down for maybe a week. And, a lot of us were blinded by that. So the governor's saying we're going to be maxed out on hospital beds by April 4th. And New Orleans not really getting in the national conversation a lot. I saw Rachel Maddow mention this last night, but just want to get out there on your show as well, Tom, and then I'll just let you go on that.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Yeah, this is going to be a major problem. And, New Orleans is going to have this problem. All of Florida is going to have this problem. You've got Disney World there. You've got, other theme parks all around the state. Of course, they're clustered around Orlando, but then you've got all the cruise ships that are coming in to Fort Lauderdale and Miami. And folks are just spreading throughout the state. Plus, it was the epicenter, Florida was, for spring break in the United States. And I'm guessing that you're going to start seeing this pop up in places like Houston as well, you know, or Galveston, you know, the port cities where you used to have the cruise ships coming in and out, and there's a lot of travel through there. We'll see, but it's going to be a rough few weeks.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Hello, Progressive.
We say fight back!
Got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit, and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at ThomHartmann.com. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Medical Apartheid, The Dark History of Medical Experimentation on Black Americans from Colonial Times to the Present by Harriet A. Washington. This is from the introduction. On a sylvan stretch of New York's patrician Upper Fifth Avenue, just across from the New York Academy of Medicine, a colossus in marble, august inscriptions, and a bas-relief caduceus grace a memorial bordering Central Park. These laurels venerate the surgeon James Marion Sims, M.D., as a selfless benefactor of women. Nor is this the only statuary erected in honor of Dr. Sims. Marble monuments to his skill, benevolence, and humanity guard his native South Carolina's State House, its medical school, the Alabama Capitol grounds, and a French hospital. In the mid-19th century, Dr. Sims dedicated his career to the care and cure of women's disorders and opened the nation's first hospital for women in New York City. He attended French royalty, his Grecian visage inspired oil portraits, and in 1875, he was elected president of the American Medical Association. Hospitals still bear his name, including a West African hospital that utilizes the eponymous gynecological instruments that he first invented for surgeries upon black female slaves in the 1840s. But this benevolent image vies with the detached Marion Sims portrayed in Robert Thom's J. Marion Sims, Gynecological Surgeon, an oil representation of an experimental surgery upon his powerless slave, Betsy. Sims stands aloof, arms folded, one hand holding a metroscope, the forerunner of the speculum, as he regards the kneeling woman in a coolly evaluative medical gaze. His tie and morning coat contrast with her simple servant's dress, head rag, and bare feet. The painting, commissioned and distributed by the Park Davis Pharmaceutical House more than a century after the surgeries, as one of its History and Medicine in Pictures series, takes telling liberties with the historical facts. Thom portrays Betsy as a fully clothed, calm slave woman who kneels complacently on a small table, hand modestly raised to her breast before a trio of white male physicians. 2 other slave women peer around a sheet, apparently hung for modesty's sake, in a childlike display of curiosity. This innocuous tableau could hardly differ more from the gruesome reality in which each surgical scene was a violent struggle between the slaves and physicians, and each woman's body was a bloodied battleground. Each naked, unanesthetized slave woman had to be forcibly restrained by the other physicians through her shrieks of agony as Sims determinedly sliced, then sutured her genitalia. The other doctors who could fled when they could bear the horrific screams no longer. It then fell to the women to restrain one another. I wanted to reproduce Thom's painting on the cover of this book, or at least in the text, but when I asked permission of its copyright holder, Pfizer Incorporated, the company insisted on reviewing the entire manuscript of this book before making a decision. As an independent scholar, I could not acquiesce to this, and I used another cover image. When I renewed my request to use the image within the text, Pfizer agreed to base its decision upon reading this chapter and an outline of the book. The Pfizer executives apparently were uncomfortable with what they read because they refused to grant permission to reproduce this telling image or even respond to my query after I supplied the requested chapter and outline. This act of censorship exemplifies the barriers some choose to erect in order to veil the history of unconscionable medical research with blacks. Betsy's voice has been silenced by history, but as one reads Sims' biographers and his own memoirs, a haughty, self-absorbed researcher emerges, a man who bought black women slaves and addicted them to morphine in order to perform dozens of exquisitely painful, distressingly intimate vaginal surgeries. Not until he had experimented with his surgeries on Betsy and her fellow slaves for years did Sims essay to cure white women. Was Sims a savior or a sadist? It depends, I suppose, on the color of the women you ask. Marion Sims epitomizes the two faces, one benign, one malevolent, of American medical research. Quote, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane." In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke those words in Montgomery, Alabama, at the end of the Selma to Montgomery march that had been attended by the black and white physicians of the Medical Committee for Human Rights. King had invited the doctors not only to give medical help to injured marchers, but also to witness the abuse suffered at the hands of segregationists. With these almost unnoticed words, King ushered in a new era in civil rights because, as Delegate to Congress Donna Christensen Christian, MD, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust, has declared, health disparities are the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Thus, Dr. King's alarm over racial health injustice was prescient, and were he alive today, his concerns would be redoubled. Mounting evidence of the racial health divide confronts us everywhere we look, from doubled black infant death rates to African-American life expectancies that fall years behind whites. Infant mortality of African Americans is twice that of whites. The book, Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Our cat is still watching kitty porn. It's just incredible. He's kind of a mutt cat, but he's mostly Bengal, and they're like the most hyperactive cats in the world. And at 7 o'clock this morning, I found these like 8-hour-long cat porn videos. It's, you know, people put food out on tables, and birds are coming in, and mice and squirrels and everything. And he's supposed to be asleep in the morning. You know, he runs around like crazy all night long, and then from, 8 o'clock in the morning until noon, he sleeps typically on our bed, but he can't go to sleep right now. He just keeps staring at the screen. Wow, it's pretty strange. Anyhow, on the line with us is Ty Benefiel, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, the co-founder and CEO of Hero Power, meter genius, green energy brokers, and host of the Climate Podcast. And myheropower.com is the company. Ty is Tybenefiel over on Twitter. Ty, am I saying your name right?
You are, Tom, and that was probably the greatest introduction that I have ever had. So thank you so much for that.
Was that the cat porn?
The cat, yes. I have never been brought on following cat porn. That's for sure.
Yeah, it is the funniest thing, Ty. It's just absolutely hysterical. So you wanted to talk about Hero Power. This is a power company. MyHeroPower.com is a green power company in the Chicago area, and I know you have a relationship with our affiliate there, WCPT, and also this podcast that you're doing. Tell us about this. Hunkering down with the green energy. I mean, is this, we have some extra time? It's a time that we can say to the power company or change power companies from one that gives us electricity from coal-fired power plants to one that gives us electricity from renewable sources. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Hero Power has made it possible for any person or business in Illinois to support renewable energy generation every time they pay their electricity bill, without ever having to pay any extra for it. We've made it possible. Hero Power matches 100% of our customers' electricity consumption with Green E certified renewable energy certificates, and we charge the exact same rate as the local utility, which here is it's ComEd, and the local utility only matches 6% of their customers' consumption with renewable energy. So basically, you're increasing your impact by 15x, and you're not paying any extra for it.
Yeah, it's a great thing. Here in Portland, I have to, I'm stuck with the one power company, and I can pay them an extra $5 a month to have all my electricity come from a green source, which is the Bonneville Dam right up the road. In fact, all of our electricity is probably coming from the Bonneville Dam, whether I pay the extra $5 a month or not, but I do. But you're talking about in the Chicago area, people can get this without even paying the extra $5. That's really cool. That's at myheropower.com. Tell me about the Climate Pod, your podcast.
Yeah, sure. So in addition to co-founding Hero Power, I'm also the co-host of the Climate Pod. It is a weekly podcast where we cover climate change and environmental issues. We talk to the leading academics, activists, journalists. We have a congressman on the podcast, all talking about what we can do to combat the climate crisis. And it's here, it's upon us right now. This is a critical moment for clean energy, as I'm sure you're very aware of our need to move to 100% renewable energy. The Senate had an opportunity last night to include money for clean energy in that $2 trillion stimulus package, and they didn't. Individuals are going to have to start making tough choices when it comes to what they can do to be more sustainable and what they, and work within a much tighter personal budget. So that's why I'm doing everything I can to promote clean energy with the Climate Pod, with Hero Power. We're just doing everything we can to get more clean energy on the grid.
Great. And just to clarify, where did it go here? MyHeroPower.com. You're providing green electricity on a regional basis. Is that correct?
That's correct. We are right now. So we launched Hero Power in Illinois, but the plan is to expand throughout the entire country. We've created this digital platform that makes it very easy for people to support renewable energy, to fund renewable energy. That's possible right now in Illinois, but we're adding features every day that make it available to people across the country. Because, like I said, we're trying to get more renewable energy out there. If you're in Illinois, it takes less than 2 minutes to join Hero Power, and you don't have to you don't have to pay anything extra. You just get all of your consumption matched with renewable energy certificates.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, Ty, thanks a lot for dropping by. It's been great talking with you.
Well, thank you, Tom. I appreciate it.
And good luck. MyHeroPower.com is the website, and Ty Benefiel, Benefiel, is the Twitter handle for Ty. So let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Paul in Glenside, Pennsylvania. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Greetings from the sunny suburbs of Philadelphia. I just wanted to let people know that there are some bright spots, government responses that I think that are positive and are noteworthy. One, in the city of Philadelphia, they have a considerable homeless population, which according to the governor's mandate to get everyone off the streets, they offered shelters, which many of them have taken up, but there's still a handful that can't or won't. They've been involuntarily removed to a hotel. The mayor bought out an entire hotel, which our tourist industry has been booming for the last 10 or 15 years. They have the entire hotel available for people who are many of the hospital workers downtown, but also the homeless population, to make sure that they don't get sick, and they're also given social work and medical care and whatever treatments they may need, but to get them off the street and to have them as sheltered as anybody else is sheltering in place. They've given them a home. Yeah. And I think it's a tremendous program that could be followed all over the nation.
One of the big lessons of the Great Depression, when initially in 1930, 1931, when Herbert Hoover was basically refusing to do anything about it because he was a Republican, there was speculation that riots would break out, and a few did here and there. But by and large, what happened was this crisis brought Americans together, and I think that's going to happen again. Paul, thanks for those great examples. Patrick in Long Island, New York. Hey, Patrick, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? Best to you. Stay safe with you and yours. And I was very, very interested in what you said about the planet. I have been outdoors for most of the week, sitting on my front porch, waving at neighbors who I never saw before because they either were never home from work or they never ventured out. I took a ride to the beach because we're surrounded by water yesterday with my youthful and active 86-year-old mother, who we keep usually quarantined, but she had her mask, and people were enjoying the outdoors. And I hope, if anything, the scientists and the other people who study the atmosphere are measuring how much improvement there has been with the lack of human contribution, and we all take note of it.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the big stories that comes out, and it's going to come out probably in about 2 weeks when the numbers start getting compiled. We already know from January and February that China's contribution to the worldwide pollution dropped dramatically. But now with Europe and the United States shut down, we're going to see, I think, a huge numbers coming out in March. So,
the only pollution I see right now is what's coming out of Trump's mouth.
I love it.
Have a good day, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. You too. That was great. I just have 15 seconds to the break here, so wouldn't be fair to put a caller on, but I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Trump is now saying, this is bizarre, Alex Henderson writing on Alternet, Trump's animosity for Democratic governors grows as White House official insists if you're good and respectful to him, he'll treat you the same. Trump wants to trash Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York. And the only thing that's restraining him is the fact that Andrew Cuomo is on TV every morning, and he's been saying nice things about Trump. And plus, more Americans are watching Cuomo on TV than are watching Trump. So it's kind of in a bind. But this is a sad state of affairs.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day. And yeah, there's still a big stack of it, and your calls after this. Stick around. And welcome back. Jim in Vancouver, Washington. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Tom, something last night on the Rachel Maddow show, which I thought was interesting. It's a company called Kinza, and they sell an electronic thermometer that sends the readings back to Kinza. So they can measure how many people are sick in the area, potentially. So, which doesn't surprise you or me, Florida is completely red. Of course, there's probably a lot of old and rich people. There's a lot of old and rich people there too. But he said, the guy Kinza to Rachel, that Florida will be the hottest place, the worst place for the virus in 2 weeks, which of course you know and I know. But this thermometer is really an interesting tool which could be used to measure temperatures, even though it's not corona specific.
Well, they're able to create an algorithm that they've been doing this for 9 years now, and so they know what a normal flu season looks like, and they know what the common cold looks like, and so they can create an algorithm that reverses those numbers out. So everything that they're looking at in that map that you saw last night, everything on that map is the stuff that's an anomaly relative to the colds or flu. It's not normal it's not within the normal spectrum for those diseases, and therefore is almost certainly coronavirus. And Florida, I looked at that and I was shocked. I mean, you're going to see a need for morgues in Florida in 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. Okay, that's about all I had. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Good talking to you, Jim. Appreciate the call. Jonathan in Portland. Hey, Jonathan, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Noticing something really peculiar. I'm looking at all of the rates of testing, or the numbers of people tested, rather, in each state compared to numbers of people testing positive. And there's a tremendous disparity. In New Jersey, 85% of the people tested are testing positive. In Oregon, it's 5%. And then all in between, 25% in New York, 12% in California, 7% in Washington. This is very hard. This is really peculiar. I don't know why this is happening. I could guess, but it's very hard to make rational decisions when you really don't have an apples-to-apples comparison.
Right. I think in New Jersey, what you're looking at is a hot spot that was previously unrecognized, and they're testing it into a hot spot. And here in Oregon, it's not yet a hot spot. We've got places that are hot spots, but it's not statewide. Or it's not, regional. It's not large chunks of the state.
I think that could be, but I think it's a guess, and I think it's something that not one person in the media has talked about, and I think it's extremely important we understand why this is happening. And the other thing that I'll say is that Oregon is at the bottom of the list in terms of hospital beds per 1,000. We have like 2 per 1,000, as compared with like D.C. or South Dakota, which is 4.4, 4.8. As compared with Germany and South Korea, and which is all 9, 8, 9, 10 hospital beds per 1,000, and I think that's why Germany and South Korea are doing better at managing it, and countries like Italy are not.
Well, they're also protecting their vulnerable populations. That's part of the whole shelter-in-place thing that they've been doing in South Korea and Germany now. If you can keep people who are at risk away from people who are likely to be contagious and be running around a lot because they're young, then that's a good thing. Jonathan, excellent points, all. Thank you very much for the call. We'll be right back. It is 19 and a half minutes past the hour. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these 3 guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit, and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at thomhartmann.com. So welcome back. I just wanted to catch you up on some of the news things that are going on, and then I'll get back to your phone calls here. This piece by Alex Henderson over on Alternet is really grim. Donald Trump said of New York, quote, "It's a two-way street. They have to treat us well also." And then the Daily Beast notes, under normal circumstances, such a screed would be cast aside as a classic bit of Trumpian, S-word talking and thin-skinnedness. But these aren't normal times, and Trump's comment resonated not only for how callous it seemed, but also for how manufactured the evidence was that he was citing. And Mario Cuomo has been going out of the way to be, calling Trump gracious. He's thanked the president. He's repeatedly said he and Trump speak often about this. When he does blast the response of the administration, he doesn't refer to Trump or the Trump administration. He refers to the federal government. But Trump has been trying to kick the blame to the states, and you're going to see more and more of this. It's going to be tough, though, when the next state to go down in flames, and I'm talking big time go down in flames, is Florida. You're going to see Florida and then Louisiana, Spring Break Central and Mardi Gras Central. You're going to see these two states experience a massive crisis, a crisis that within 4 weeks from now is going to be a crisis of morgue facilities. Keep in mind, Trump goes on TV and says, 35,000 people a year die from the flu. And so you've got people saying, well, it's just the flu. No, this is going to kill between 1 million and 2 million Americans, and maybe as many as 3 million Americans if we don't do something, if we don't batten down the hatches. We've got to get ready for this. Meanwhile, Rod Kovacevic, the former CEO of Wells Fargo, in an interview with Bloomberg, this is how these psychopathic or sociopathic banksters, these bank CEOs think. He said, and I quote, "We'll gradually bring those people back and see what happens. Some of them will get sick. Some may even die. I don't know. Do you want to suffer more economically or take some risk that you'll get flu-like symptoms and a flu-like experience? Do you want to take an economic risk or a health risk? You get to choose." This is what happens when these flaming fools listen to Donald Trump and watch Fox News and listen to right-wing hate radio. And they're misinformed, and they're putting all the rest of us at risk. Meanwhile, India has said, hydroxychloroquine sounds great. We make it here in India. In fact, we make the world's supply of it here in India. And guess what, United States? You're not going to get any. India has banned the export of hydrochloroquine, this drug that Donald Trump is touting, the anti-malaria drug, that seems to have some effectiveness against severe cases of this and, may even have broader application. We'll find out as the science starts coming in. But India has said no. And India also shut down the entire country, 1.3 billion people, which causes me to wonder. I told you a few weeks ago, my doctor contacted me and said, I want to write a 90-day prescription for your blood pressure meds. Now, I'm taking a very low dose of a drug, but the drug is only manufactured in India out of a raw material that only comes out of China. And so he said, knowing this, I'm going to give you a 90-day supply. Well, now I'm starting to think maybe I should have a year's supply, except that I can't reach my doctor. He's swamped with people who are freaked out about coronavirus. The last thing he wants is, will you double my prescription? And that sounds like hoarding, and that's probably not a good thing. But 3 months from now, or 2.5 months from now, some of us might be in for a big surprise. We'll see where this goes, but I am very, very concerned about this. Down in Texas, this falls into the category of these absolute flaming fools, these asses who watch Fox News. These poor, maybe I should portray them as poor victims of Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch. But the Fort Worth Star-Telegram reports that Judge Chris Hill on Tuesday, this is from Raw Story, released an order stating that businesses should stay open on the grounds that closing them would be bad for the economy. Hill wrote this is a judge making an order. Yes, you must go to work in Texas. He said persons who are employed need to stay employed. Persons who lack employment need to gain employment. All businesses, jobs, and workers are essential to the financial health and well-being of our local economy, and therefore are essential to the financial health and well-being of Collin County citizens. So he said, social distancing, cool, sanitary measures, cool, but everybody needs to go to work. This is how bad it's getting. Then Donald Trump has got, he's got a weekly Bible meeting that for his cabinet. He doesn't show up, but his cabinet members do, including Betsy DeVos, Ben Carson, Alex Azar, and Mike Pompeo, 4 hardcore fundamentalist Christians. I believe Pompeo is Catholic. I'm not sure Ben Carson. DeVos is one of these Calvinists. She follows the Calvinist teaching that John Calvin laid out, that if you're rich, that means you're one of God's chosen people. And Alex Azar, I don't know, but 4 of 52 members of Congress every week get together with this pastor, and his name is Ralph Drollinger, and he does a Bible study every week. And in his most recent Bible study, he says, this is a quote from Sky Palma over on Daily Kos, excuse me. He railed against the religion of environmentalism and people who express a proclivity toward lesbianism and homosexuality, who he claims have infiltrated high positions in our government, our educational system, our media, and our entertainment industry, and are largely responsible for God's wrath on our nation. That is to say, the coronavirus.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
This is Trump's official pastor doing Bible study with his cabinet, saying that gay people are responsible for the coronavirus? Really? I remember this from the Reagan administration. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Medical Apartheid, the dark history of medical experimentation on black Americans from colonial times to the present, by Harriet A. Washington. This is from the introduction. On a sylvan stretch of New York's patrician Upper Fifth Avenue, just across from the New York Academy of Medicine, a colossus in marble, august inscriptions, and a bas-relief caduceus grace a memorial bordering Central Park. These laurels venerate the surgeon James Marion Sims, M.D., as a selfless benefactor of women. Nor is this the only statuary erected in honor of Dr. Sims. Marble monuments to his skill, benevolence, and humanity guard his native South Carolina's State House, its medical school, the Alabama Capitol grounds, and a French hospital. In the mid-19th century, Dr. Sims dedicated his career to the care and cure of women's disorders and opened the nation's first hospital for women in New York City. He attended French royalty, his Grecian visage inspired oil portraits, and in 1875 he was elected president of the American Medical Association. Hospitals still bear his name, including a West African hospital that utilizes the eponymous gynecological instruments that he at first invented for surgeries upon black female slaves in the 1840s. But this benevolent image vies with the detached Marion Sims portrayed in Robert Thom's J. Marion Sims, Gynecological Surgeon, an oil representation of an experimental surgery upon his powerless slave, Betsy. Sims stands aloof, arms folded, one hand holding a metroscope, the forerunner of the speculum, as he regards the kneeling woman in a coolly evaluative medical gaze. His tie and morning coat contrast with her simple servant's dress, head rag, and bare feet. The painting, commissioned and distributed by the Park Davis Pharmaceutical House more than a century after the surgeries, as one of its History and Medicine in Pictures series, takes telling liberties with the historical facts. Thom portrays Betsy as a fully clothed, calm slave woman who kneels complacently on a small table, hand modestly raised to her breast before a trio of white male physicians. Two other slave women peer around a sheet, apparently hung for modesty's sake, in a childlike display of curiosity. This innocuous tableau could hardly differ more from the gruesome reality in which each surgical scene was a violent struggle between the slaves and physicians, and each woman's body was a bloodied battleground. Each naked, unanesthetized slave woman had to be forcibly restrained by the other physicians through her shrieks of agony as Sims determinedly sliced, then sutured her genitalia. The other doctors who could fled when they could bear the horrific screams no longer. It then fell to the women to restrain one another. I wanted to reproduce Thom's painting on the cover of this book, or at least in the text, but when I asked permission of its copyright holder, Pfizer Incorporated, the company insisted on reviewing the entire manuscript of this book before making a decision. As an independent scholar, I could not acquiesce to this, and I used another cover image. When I renewed my request to use the image within the text, Pfizer agreed to base its decision upon reading this chapter and an outline of the book. The Pfizer executives apparently were uncomfortable with what they read because they refused to grant permission to reproduce this telling image or even respond to my query after I supplied the requested chapter and outline. This act of censorship exemplifies the barriers some choose to erect in order to veil the history of unconscionable medical research with blacks. Betsy's voice has been silenced by history, but as one reads Sims' biographers and his own memoirs, a haughty, self-absorbed researcher emerges, a man who bought black women slaves and addicted them to morphine in order to perform dozens of exquisitely painful, distressingly intimate vaginal surgeries. Not until he had experimented with his surgeries on Betsy and her fellow slaves for years did Sims essay to cure white women. Was Sims a savior or a sadist? It depends, I suppose, on the color of the women you ask. Marion Sims epitomizes the two faces, one benign, one malevolent, of American medical research. Quote, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane." In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke those words in Montgomery, Alabama, at the end of the Selma to Montgomery march that had been attended by the black and white physicians of the Medical Committee for Human Rights. King had invited the doctors not only to give medical help to injured marchers, but also to witness the abuse suffered at the hands of segregationists. With these almost unnoticed words, King ushered in a new era in civil rights because, as Delegate to Congress Donna Christensen Christian, MD, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust, has declared, health disparities are the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Thus, Dr. King's alarm over racial health injustice was prescient, and were he alive today, his concerns would be redoubled. Mounting evidence of the racial health divide confronts us everywhere we look, from doubled black infant death rates to African-American life expectancies that fall years behind whites. Infant mortality of African-Americans is twice that of whites. The book, Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington. Both Joel Gamble and Professor Richard Wolff join me for a survival guide in a coronavirus economy. And Richard Hallam, author of Common Sense for the 21st Century, drops by to explain what is the Extinction Rebellion and what do they do. Check it out wherever you find great podcasts. In our latest video for folks who support our show over at thomhartmann.com, it's pretty mind-boggling, actually. The candidate Trump back in 2016 said, I'm not going to cut Social Security like every other Republican, and I'm not going to cut Medicare or Medicaid. Every other Republican is going to cut, but I won't. That's what he said. Well, what did his budget actually propose? His budget actually proposed, this is last year's budget. Congress didn't pass it, thank God, but this is what his budget proposed. $1.9 trillion in cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, and $26 billion in cuts to Social Security. And now he is block granting Medicaid to the states, which is already cutting back on Medicaid programs in the red states. You can check it all out over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Update on my cat. I've been saying it's cat porn. Maybe I should describe it in a different way, because that kind of implies that anybody who watches porn wants to sit and watch it for hours and hours at a time. Maybe it's more like Game of Thrones for kitties. I mean, it's like my cat is binge watching birds and mice and squirrels eat food. I mean, he's just sitting there, and he's, typically the last 3 hours he would be asleep, and he's in his I'm asleep posture, but he's got his eyes like they keep nodding off, and then he pops open again and nods off and pops open again when another bird jumps on the thing. It's hysterical. So anyway, what can I say? Paul in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Well, I want to talk about the coming train wreck, and I'm not talking about just the COVID-19 virus, as you've already covered what outbreaks are likely to accelerate, but what Donald Trump has in mind. It's not all that hard to see that before Easter, he's going to declare this emergency over, and he's going to say, go back to work, It's all over. Everything's fine. And I say before Easter because he said yesterday, can you imagine the churches being filled with happy people on Easter Sunday? What a beautiful sight. So he has that in mind to say, and he will say that that's what happened. He's going to say, Monday we're going back regardless. And the problem here is this. First of all, Donald Trump, the president, has no authority to tell people of any state to stay at home. None. The Constitution, the First Amendment, guarantees that the governors have the absolute authority to do that. The only time the president has the authority to do that is if there's any state in which the government, the state government, is in danger of being overthrown. And I read about this when I was reading about the Detroit riots of 1967, when Governor Romney, wanted President Johnson to bring federal troops in, and Johnson said, "I can't do it. I can't do it. I can loan you some National Guard troops from another state, but you're not in danger of being overthrown."
But Eisenhower did that. Troops. Eisenhower did that. He escorted. That was for black students who wanted to go to college.
At Central High School, yeah, I understand that. I understand that.
Or high school,
but that was upholding a Supreme Court decision.
Right.
So he was upholding the law, and the state. He was upholding federal law, and the state was trying to get in the way of that. That's what the difference was, I would say. But the fact is, the governors, the crisis is not going to be over. So the governors are not going to be lifting these. They may still have restrictions in place. And so what he's going to do is he's going to say the governors are standing in the way. They're crippling the economy, and they're standing in the way. And he's going to be talking. He's going to play the Ronald Reagan optimism card and make and you have to admit that most of the states, California, Washington, New York, these the production states, which are responsible for the economy. He's going to argue that these are blue states, and he's going to argue they're getting in the way of the recovering economy. And people, the thing is,
the two things that might blow that up, Paul, are Florida and Louisiana.
We'll see, but they seem to be in a different world. But what I'm saying is that because it wasn't argued, nobody argued when Trump said gave his recommendation to stay at home. That was a recommendation. Nobody argued with that and saying you don't have the authority, because everybody wanted that to be the case. But he didn't have the authority. The governors have the absolute authority to make that decision, as many governors have. And so nobody got into the nitpicky argument of saying that he didn't have the authority. But now that he's going to say, I'm lifting it, well, he doesn't have the authority to do either one. So he's going to make the governors of these states look like the bad guys and gals and try to make it. And there are some of these states where there are, pivotal elections going on in November. And he's going to make this. He's going to be playing the optimism card, and he's going to tie it with Easter because it's the resurrection of it. We're going to have this resurrection of the economy. Which, by the way, you look at this. Yesterday the market gained 2,113 points, and that wasn't based on earnings, Tom. That was based on the promise of free money from the federal government. Is that free market capitalism and free enterprise? I mean, we hear about
it's up 1,000 points right now, too.
Exactly. So this is all fluff. This is what I call it. I told you before, it's the cotton candy economy. It's not based on earnings, and it never was. It never was. It was always propped up by Trump's monetary policy, his tax cuts, and his low interest rates, and just give it. I mean, to argue that this is an economy is BS. And I've always said that the stock market is not the economy. And when you look at the actual growth, Trump has had, under his watch, 1 quarter of 3.1% growth. 1 quarter. All the rest of it has been under 3.1%, averaging about 2.5%. And remember, the malaise years of Jimmy Carter, he averaged 3.1% for 4 years. So Trump saying he got one, so he can't really crow about his economic growth here.
But and I agree with your assessment that he's going to start attacking governors. He's already started attacking Cuomo. Cuomo is walking this very, very fine line. We'll see, though. I think Florida melting down and Ron DeSantis freaking out, which is going to happen in a week or so, is going to change the entire equation. But I could be wrong. We'll see. Paul, thanks for the call. Michael in Orlando, Florida. Hey, Michael, you are in the bullseye. What's up?
How you doing there? I live in Orlando near the convention center off International Drive. And on Channel 13, Spectrum News, they said that they're giving it over there and they gave directions how to get it there, blah, blah, blah. But at the end, the lady said that the most testing they could do in one day is 250, period.
Right.
That's a federal mandate. That doesn't sound right to me, because if there's 251 and 252...
Yeah, it's not a federal mandate. It's how much. It's probably how many testing kits they have.
No, she didn't say that, because they're going to be there tomorrow also. And it's 250.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Channel 13. I don't know if you... yeah.
If it's a federal mandate, that means that there's 250 federal testing kits. Those are CDC test kits. But,
Right.
that would mean that they're not using the ones from the private labs, or the ones from the private labs are not available in Florida. We need to get a little more information on that, Michael, but I wish you the very best. Please stay very, very safe. You are in a danger zone, and be
I'm
careful.
in the house.
Good. Be good to your whoever you're confined with, as it were, and stay safe. Michael, thank you for the call. Tony in Los Lunas, New Mexico. Hey, Tony, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. I called. I've got a timeline here on how all this took place from the start, and it's all right. I'd like to run through some of it. I can.
Yeah, you got a minute and a half.
Sure. Okay. December the 10th was when, and excuse me if I butcher some of these names, Wu Guixian was one of the earliest known coronavirus patients to start feeling ill in China. On December the 27th, the Wuhan health officials are told that a new coronavirus is causing the illness. On December 30th, A. Finn, which was a top director at the Wuhan Central Hospital, posted on WeChat about the virus. She was reprimanded for doing so and told not to spread the information about it. January the 1st, Wuhan Public Security Bureau brings in for questioning 8 doctors who had posted about the illness on WeChat.
Right. No, Tony, I think we all pretty much know the timeline. What's the point you're trying to make?
Okay. Well, the point is and to get up to a little bit, on January the 14th, the World Health Organization stated there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. Okay, and it wasn't until January the 20th that the Chinese actually announced that the virus could be passed between people. On January 31st,
that's the case, Tony. I'm sorry, Tony. Your timeline is great. Keep it up. I've seen timelines over on right-wing websites that try to make it look like Donald Trump couldn't have known. Nobody knew. And I've seen on scientific websites that suggest that basically China knew possibly even in November that they had this problem, and by December it became a real mess, and that our spies were telling Trump in December and January that this was coming. I mean, that's
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
So I don't know if you were trying to vindicate Trump or you were trying to inform us, but just reading dates is not a useful thing. We'll be back. And welcome back. Richie in Seattle. Hey, Richie, what's on your mind? Richie? No, Richie. Okay, Pete in Seattle. What's on your mind today, Pete?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I have been wondering for quite a while, as this pandemic has been developing, and from everything that we know about it from the science, it seems to me that the first thing that everybody should be doing is wearing masks, or something to cover their mouths and noses, especially, food workers and other service providers, There
was a really good article I'm a member of the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and they publish a magazine every week called Science. And there was a really good article, I don't know if it was on their blog or in their magazine's website, that I read a couple days ago, saying that the way that the Chinese have done this, the people who need to wear masks, are the people who are contagious. Because just literally just being in the same breathing area with somebody who's contagious, you can acquire it. You don't even have to talk to them. You just have to stand near them. But the problem is that unlike the cold and flu, where you're not contagious until you have symptoms, with this virus, this coronavirus, you're contagious the day after you're infected, whether you have symptoms or not. And so the goal is to get everybody to wear a mask on the hopes that the 10% of people who are infected, or 1%, will be thus stopped. But if you say to the population, if you think you're sick, wear a mask, or if you're worried about getting sick, wear a mask, what that does is it causes the mask to be a sign of a focus of social stigma. And people will be reluctant to wear the mask because they don't want to be, basically stigmatized. They don't want to say, yes, I'm carrying the plague. And so what China did was they said, if you go out of your house, you must wear a mask. If you're in any public place, you must wear a mask, whether you're sick or not, whether you're old or young. Everybody. This is the law now. China's doing this. South Korea's doing this. I believe Japan and Taiwan are doing it. And what that does is it's sort of like the locking down in place. It catches the people who would otherwise be contagious. Am I singing your tune here, Pete?
You are totally. It's like so logical,
Yeah.
And then it removes that, that stigma if it's there for somebody. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, and this is what we need to do. Pete, thank you for that. That was a great question or comment. Steve from Topanga, California. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I was just reflecting if Trump signs the bill that the Senate is passed on to the House, I don't know why he could deny calling himself a socialist, because it's socialist policy all the way, which I totally support. But
Steve, I don't think there's a single company in there that is being taken over by the federal government.
Yeah, what I'm saying is,
a la Venezuela or the Soviet Union. That requires the federal government to actually take over the companies.
No, I'm not talking about it like that. I'm talking about it in the sense that he's being forced to do things under more of a socialist brand.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Which I think is good, and it just shows that it's a good thing. All right.
I think it's causing this. Thank you, Steve. Spot on. I'm sorry I misinterpreted what you were saying. This is causing everybody in America, I think, or at least it's causing a conversation about what are the appropriate roles of government. Should government be here for us when we fall? Should they catch us when we fall? I mean, that's what the social safety net's all about. And he pointed it out brilliantly in that call. We'll be right back. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. James in Spokane, Washington. Hey, James, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I listen to you all the time, as you know. I'm preaching to the choir when I tell you I'm a firm believer in the power of positive thinking. And the GOP, they're nothing but spoilers. They're so negative. It's going to hit them much harder. You need positive thinking in order to repel it and to get better from it. And they're nothing but negativity, Tom. It's we're going to have to suffer for this, but this is the only way we're going to take out Trump at this point. The system is too corrupt.
And not just Trump. The whole. Yeah, this whole right-wing idea that you're on your own, buddy, is the best way to run a government. And that is being proven in real time right in front of us. Or the idea that, if you're going to have a healthcare system, you really have to have a bunch of crony capitalists in there running it for you so that they can take billions of dollars of your healthcare dollars. I think it's going to blow up all of these ideas. And we're going to see that the stuff that the progressives have been talking about for a long, long time is absolutely spot on. James, thank you. Spot on. Dave in Montpelier, Vermont. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom. As I watch this whole coronavirus issue play out and people on TV describe their symptoms, friends and I are talking amongst ourselves saying, I may have had that because those symptoms describe an illness. And in my case, I have underlying conditions. So I went to the doctor, I believe, January 21st, same day first case was detected, turned up negative for flu, which, conventional flu. But I felt like crap. I couldn't breathe. So I'm just wondering, is there a suggestion that this may have been circulating long before we knew, or you were?
There is, yeah, and any city that has an airport in it is probably going to be at more risk than cities that don't, because people. I mean, I used to live in Montpelier, and I would fly, and I used to fly to Asia and whatnot when I lived in Montpelier, and people will, I just change planes in a hub. Yeah, but I think, Dave, the bottom line, and thank you for the call. It's a good question. I think the bottom line is that, almost certainly this had been circulating in the United States probably before our first patient, because in Washington State, I believe, which on January 20th, because it certainly was in the United States for at least a week or two before that, and probably longer than that. So, we'll find out eventually. What we need is a serological test, the test for antibodies in the bloodstream that will tell us if you have been previously infected. That's going to be the key to a lot of stuff. Bruce in Clinton, Iowa. Hey, Bruce, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Been a while. Hey, I've heard a number of people talk about MASH units, facilities for people with coronavirus. But what I've wondered is, we've got a number of closed rural hospitals. We have closed nursing homes. Some of the rural and small-town hospitals are struggling, even in part because of the virus. But I have not heard anybody really talking about, is there some plan for getting those hospitals and nursing homes, getting those back open, getting those staffed, and getting them ready to take care of patients? What is the problem with this?
All I can do is guess, Bruce, based on what I've been reading. I just finished writing a book about monopoly, which, in fact, I got the page proofs back today. And in writing that book, what I discovered was that there was this large for-profit hospital chain that had been taken over by a hedge fund or by a vulture capital company, one of Mitt Romney's kind of companies. And they had bought up a bunch of the local regional hospitals, and then they had the big city hospital, and they closed all the regional hospitals that fed the big city hospital to force people to go to the big city hospital because it operated more profitably than the regional ones did. But they didn't actually close them. What they did was they closed them, but they kept 2 or 3 people on staff to, quote, keep them open, even though they weren't seeing any patients, to legally keep them open for 12 months and 1 day. Because if a hospital has ceased to operate for a month, and they did this for a year and a day, so that they could, so that the local communities could not buy these hospitals back and reboot them. Because if the hospital has not seen patients in a year and a day, then they have to go through the federal recertification process from ground zero. They have to start at zero and certify every piece of equipment in the hospital. Is a process that typically takes up to a year. And so and they did this so that local communities couldn't turn the hospitals back on. They couldn't take them over. So after a year and a day, then they would sell the hospitals. And of course, nobody wanted to buy them, so they're just going fallow. So that may be the problem that they're facing, that Cuomo's facing. I mean, he was this morning talking about motels and hotels and college dorms and things like this. But with, there's 500,000 hospital beds in the United States that we used to have in 1980 and we no longer have. 1/3 of our total hospital bed capacity. And to what extent they may be revivable, I just don't know. I think, though, that these guys who got rid of these hospital beds did it in a way that would make it really hard to bring them back. Bruce, thanks for the call. Lisa in Niles, Ohio. Lisa, we just have 30 seconds to the break. You got a quick one?
Well, I can make it quick. I worked as a nurse for 17 years. Bottom line, when are we going to believe the science and the medical experts? I really think society is coming to an inflection point. You and I know what's going to happen in Florida. That's going to be horrific. But the science foretells it, right? How can humans deny it after that happens? I don't even believe what Trump says anymore. We know he's delusional. Listen to the science. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you said it very well, Lisa. Thank you. You said it very, very well, and with 6 seconds to spare. But spot on. I mean, this is the thing. Listen to the governors, and some of them are in for a rude awakening. You got Republican governors in Mississippi and Florida who basically chose to do nothing and allow Mardi Gras and spring break to roll on to make a few extra bucks, you know, before we have to shut down. And now you're going to see they're going to run out of morgue capacity at 3 or 4 weeks. It's that bad. So anyway, share it with your friends. Keep yourself safe. Keep your friends safe. Be good to other people. Reach out to friends, family, and neighbors. You know, this is what electronic communication is all about. Use your telephone. Use FaceTime. Use Skype. Whatever you can. Get out there. Get active. Technically speaking. Tag you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
We say fight back! Bye.